This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in that fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo, Denise Pellegrini pulled a short straw today. We're thrilled to welcome Denise Pellegrini to the program. She'll be here to keep things going. And for Michael Barr, this morning, Pellegrini said, I'm not coming in until the market goes down.
Okay. All right. Well, we got a mixed day today, I guess. I don't know. We had 8 days in a row, Tom. Market's moving higher here. That's the longest streak in 2024.
Under 15.
Sure. I know.
Under 15.
Yep. Thank you for calling that
I haven't even framed out under 14.
No.
We're not there yet.
No. So, but we got the, kind of futures mixed here today. We're going to have some economic data. We're thinking about this place out there in Wyoming. I think some people are going to be heading out to later this week.
Going home to
That'll
pack.
be important.
Yeah. People said, what do you wear out there? I just wear, the usual suit, tie.
Bow tie.
Kansas City Fed growls at me.
Exactly.
You're supposed to be casual.
Sure.
I said, this is casual.
This is casual.
This is casual at the Keene household. 10-year yield, 1.80% shows the risk on. And you did this with Matt Miller yesterday at 11 a.m.
Yep.
BitDog lifting 61,000.
I know. I mean, we had a nice little... It was 2 weeks ago. We were at 50,000. It's just all over the place here. But we'll take it. We'll take it. It's a risk asset.
And then the one trend, just to wrap this up, is the weaker dollar. I'm sorry, we have a tangibly weaker dollar.
Yep.
There is a trend to it. DXY for 104, a 101 handle now, 101.79.
Yep. Keep an eye on that. WTI crude oil sitting right around $74 a barrel here. So and gold, another move higher, $160 an ounce.
Yeah, send a note to Eric, and we'll do everything we can to get Dennis Gartman on. He has been brilliant on gold and also on weak yen at the same time. Gold and yen has been resilient, a stronger security. Gartman's trade of the decade, to say the least. 2561 on gold. We're on Android, we're on Apple CarPlay, we're on YouTube. We'll tell you about that through the show. Thrilled at the build out of the YouTube podcast. Go to YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. It's growing every day. Just humbled by it, particularly the international audience. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Good morning, and I guess you could say traders are, taking a breather maybe? We've got red and green on the screen. Monday's session, it lifted the S&P 500 for an 8th day in a row. So we have NASDAQ futures up about 0.1%, 27 points. Dow futures, little change, down 2 points. S&P futures up about 0.1% or 6 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.06%. That's little change. And the yield on the 10-year, 3.88%. And that is little change. Commodities, oil extended the biggest drop in 2 weeks. The U.S. said Israel accepted a ceasefire proposal in Gaza. So right now we have Brent crude $77 a barrel, WTI crude $74 a barrel. Gold top $2,500 an ounce. Expectations that the Fed set to cut interest rates. So right now we have spot gold higher at $2,522 an ounce. To earnings we go. We'll start with Lowe's down 0.5%. The soft housing market really forced the company to lower its full year guidance. And this comes after a similar report from Home Depot as well. A few companies making news. We'll start with Apple. Sources saying it's making its first India-made iPhone Pro models this year. Foxconn will begin assembling those new devices within weeks of their global launch this fall. Apple up about 0.1%. And finally, the European Union said it plans to introduce a 9% tariff on Teslas imported from China. Now, shares up about 0.5%, but that could be because the news isn't all that bad for Tesla. That tariff is actually lower than the duty rate of other manufacturers that they're facing. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Joining us now for a 3-hour conversation, Jeffrey Yu, EMA market analyst, BNY Mellon, barely describes his abilities, the importance of his research note from BNY Mellon. Jeff Yu, why is the dollar weaker?
Well, the dollar is weaker right now because it's just Fed expectations are driving everything. And I must say I'm very perplexed at why other currencies are not weaker as well. I remember a couple of months ago, I was a bit of an outlier in calling for more ECB cuts. And now the market is pricing in more ECB cuts, yet euro-dollar is higher. So what can you do? It just shows
well, is that
you where
the opportunity? I mean, Denise Pellegrini's got to make some money here. She's in for Michael Barr today. Should Denise Pellegrini short the third world should she short the euro?
I still maintain that the euro is going to fall right now on a trade-weighted basis. Valuations are out of line, but just pick the long leg carefully. Right now, you're probably better off with funding currencies, so safety plays, yen notwithstanding. Look at a few others in Asia, Korean won, and of course the Swiss franc.
And Ari, give me some love. Give me some YouTube on Denise Pellegrini. Paul, she's wearing EU blue today.
I know, very good. She knows what she's doing. So, Jeffrey, talk to us about Jackson Hole here. All the Cowboys are going to be out there in Wyoming in a couple of days, including Tom Keene and even Lisa Abramowitz. I'm going to see her on horseback. What do you expect from Jackson Hole?
Well, so probably whatever we expect, it's probably still not going to be enough for markets to move as much. It's only in terms of relative to expectations. So what I expect, the Fed will not rock the boat. Chair Powell will not rock the boat. His peers, Governor Bailey, for example, will also be speaking there. They will not rock the boat. They're very happy that this soft landing narrative has returned to market centrality, and they're not going to shift that because data isn't telling them otherwise right now. But overall, can markets rally from here? We go back to that word demand. If demand is there, then markets can rally or remain stable at least, but then it's going to be down to earnings and the next round as well.
All right, Jeffrey, you're out there in Canary Wharf in London's West End. Talk to us about the European markets here. Where do you see opportunities? What do your clients want to talk to you about in terms of European markets?
Well, frankly, I don't think clients do really want to talk about European equity opportunities as much. They do, however, want to talk about they are overweight the US. They are looking for opportunities away from the US. What are the best equity markets or fixed income markets in that matter? And not just in FX, but we're seeing, based on our custodial flows, rotation out of global fixed income, EM fixed income, into EM equities. So let's expand things in terms of Europe, not just Eurozone. I look at Central and Eastern Europe. I look at flows into Turkey, very resilient right now. Where you were underweight, now you want to be overweight, especially in EM.
Jeff, you have one final question, and I want to set this up correctly, folks. Steve Raschuto over at Mizuno set up a great correlation, or pair, I should say, between global disinflation and the United States of America that has to reset at a higher level of R-starred, higher level of maybe future inflation as well. And Jeff, he said that in the middle of that is dollar dynamics. Do you agree that between the Titanic supply, global disinflation, and how the U.S. has messed up its debt and deficit, that the dollar will be the thing that moves?
Again, against what? You mentioned R-star. Are we really saying the Eurozone R-star is going to be higher than the dollar R-star or anything like that? No, it's not. If we just look at potential growth, that is not going to happen, right? So Euro dollar still see lower, but dollar against some others, that's where the differentials and the valuation gaps need to narrow to some extent, especially higher growth APAC.
Can the R-star dynamic be addressed at Jackson Hole? To me, that's a critical observation.
I do think it would, because right now the market is probably shifting towards more of a view on we're at an easing cycle, and whenever you start an easing cycle, just as we did during a tightening cycle, you want to know where terminal rates are and whether terminal rates is going to be at a high level compared to in the past. And I think most central bankers around the world, they are gearing the market up for remember those zero rates in QE. Those times are not coming back, but also don't expect structurally high terminal rates either. It's always going to be somewhere in between.
Jeffrey, is there any bearish case for the U.S. dollar here?
Well, again, I look at against what? Dollar yen, we still see much lower, 130 handle at least towards the end of the year. Dollar against APAC, outside of dollar CNY, by the way, because there's a difference in terms of policy, a difference in policy differentials. I took a look at dollar Korea, dollar Taiwan. I think those are areas where I still want to sell the dollar. Dollar LATAM is going to be an interesting one because the carry trade is still in place. As much as I look at Mexico, Banxico, very credible in terms of keeping real rates high, but that trade is already well owned. So despite fundamentals, probably dollar will be stable, if not slightly higher, against LATAM FX up ahead. But euro dollar still calling it lower. Alas, parity probably a bit too much. So let's go for 105 at least.
Jeffrey, thank you so much. With BNY Mellon today, with a call there on euro weakness implying dollar resiliency, if not dollar strengths as well. The VIX, wow, 14.86. With our news in New York City, Denise Pellegrini.
Hey there, Tom. Thank you. President Biden delivering an emotional, bittersweet call for Democrats to rally behind his Vice President Kamala Harris. President touting his legacy, passing the torch to a new generation.
It's been the honor of my lifetime to serve as your president. I love the job, but I love my country more.
And Biden also pleading with voters to keep fighting for what he calls the dangerous ideas of Donald Trump, protect against them. He says the Republican nominee is a threat to democracy.
Democracy has prevailed. Democracy has delivered. And now democracy must be preserved.
And instead of talking about being pushed out, Biden is really casting this decision to exit as a natural conclusion of his political career. And his speech followed a surprise appearance on stage from Vice President Harris.
Joe, thank you for your historic leadership, for your lifetime of service to our nation, and for all you will continue to do. We are forever grateful to you.
Harris calling Biden an incredible president. Biden, meantime, telling reporters he remains hopeful about a ceasefire deal to end the Israeli-Hamas war in Gaza. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in the region. He says Israel has accepted a ceasefire proposal. Blinken's pressuring Hamas to do the same.
The fierce urgency of now, that's what I think we're all feeling. And we do see this as the best opportunity to finally get this over the finish line. We'll never give up on it, but the challenge is the longer this goes on, the more hostages will suffer and possibly perish, and the more other things happen that could make things impossible.
And Blinken goes to Egypt and Qatar next. And we have this breaking news. Eli Lilly's Zepbound cut the risk of diabetes by 94% in obese people. Just the latest in a string of things we've seen like this from these drugs. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Denise Pellegrini, and this is Bloomberg. Tom.
Denise, thanks so much. Whole set of headlines from Lilly. We'll look those over and get back to you on that in a moment. There he was last night, a basketball coach, which is not giving him justice, but Steve Kerr at the DNC, of the Golden State Warriors.
He's been, I think he's used his perch as a coach in the NBA and as a NBA, champion to voice his political views, and he's pretty much out there. So, but he gets a big.
Is there any zeitgeist that he's running for office? I don't think so.
I haven't seen that.
He's still bouncing basketballs.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, with the Golden State Warriors, but I think. He's kind of always had a pretty high profile on some of these political issues, and so I guess that gets him a slot. So good for him.
Steve Kerr, I thought they could, somebody from the Blackhawks up.
Right, Chicago, right.
That would just wanted to say night.
Right, yeah, maybe, yep. So he was up there. He gets a spot there on a Monday night.
Okay, so we'll see.
Good for him.
I mean, there was the first night, and of course, second night tonight. Amory Horder and a host of others travel bound, now pushing 60 hours. I saw Joe Baker over at the Wall Street Journal, same thing. They're all sitting in airports on the East Coast.
Don't we know somebody with a plane that can
trying to get out? We tried to. Farrow had it to go over to see Tottenham Leicester.
Okay.
And I think John's back. And so maybe the Gulf Stream, she's
can't
getting
we get our news
people
people where they need to be? I mean, it sounds simple enough.
But it's a whole industry. I mean, everybody's talked in Washington, New York, Boston is sort of, they're straggling into Chicago as they go. We're going to straggle to a data check. What you need to know in this bull market, VIX 14.87. The levels are stunning. Futures levels, 5,600 SPX, 41,000 Dow,
wow,
19,900 NASDAQ. As Paul says, those are just simply wow statistics. 10-year real yield 1.80%. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lise Mateo. Futures trying to keep that momentum from yesterday's session going strong. Investors feel a little bit more confident that the Federal Reserve will soon signal it's ready to start cutting interest rates. But it's a tough battle. Right now, NASDAQ futures only up about 0.1%, 22 points. Dow futures, little change, down about 14. S&P futures, little change, up about 5. We have the 2-year yield at 4.06%. That's down 1 basis point. The 10-year yield at 3.87%, and that is little change. We have a win for Alaska Air and Hawaiian Holdings. The Justice Department has decided against challenging their $1.9 billion merger. Now, the carriers still need approval from the Department of Transportation. Right now, Alaska Air up about 0.1%, Hawaiian Holdings up 10%. Kroger looking to block the FTC's in-house case against its proposed purchase of rival grocer Albertsons. Kroger calls it unconstitutional. Kroger down nearly 1%, Albertsons up 0.2%. And the Financial Times reporting a Couche-Tard bid for Seven & i. Well, that could face U.S. antitrust challenges. Sources say that combo, the operator of Circle K brand and the Japanese operator of 7-Eleven, well, it could increase prices for consumers, also damage the labor market. Now, Couche-Tard down about 2% in Canada. Seven & i, yesterday at this time, it was up more than 20%, now down 10% in Japan. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate that. If you read the Wikipedia of one of the great restorations in the history of hoteldom, and I've been honored to stay there, the Fullerton Hotel, Singapore.
Oh, boy. Yep.
And there's a single sentence on the Wikipedia that says all. For business travelers in Derek Wallbank in Singapore, the hotel and the hotel bar has a 24-hour financial center with a Bloomberg professional service.
There you go.
That provides financial reports and world news. Joining us now from the bar of the Fullerton Hotel with his Bloomberg logged in, Derek Wallbank joins us this morning from Singapore. Derek, the great thing with you is your distance from the maelstrom in America. Is Asia, is Singapore, is Europe riveted on Chicago and the DNC?
Yeah, look, Tom, I think there's a lot of attention being focused around the world because of the geopolitical risk that we're seeing across all these sectors, right? There's a lot of questions. I was getting a ton of questions. Is this sewn up for Donald Trump? This is just a month ago. Oh, this must be over. And now it's like, oh, who's Kamala Harris? We have to figure this out. Who's Tim Walz? What does this mean? And there's been such a seismic shift over here. I think there's been an awful lot of attention, and you can see it in any financial capital you go to in Asia. There's really a lot of attention being paid to what's going on in the middle of the country in the U.S.
What's so different here is there's no statement of policy. There's literally a dearth of like adult policy. How quaint.
Yep.
A platform.
Right.
How do you deal with this abroad, Derek, if you don't have a Harris platform or a Trump platform?
Well, with Trump, I tell people about what he did the last time. And we talk a lot, Tom, here about what can you just do, right? Tariffs are a thing Donald Trump, if he wins, could just do versus you need Congress to be involved. But it's funny, though, because you'd think that people wouldn't necessarily know because maybe as Americans, a lot of Americans don't know how the intricacies of smaller countries' governments work. But people over here, I've talked to folks in the last couple of weeks who've been talking to me about 60 vote thresholds in the Senate. There is an awful lot of fluency on this side of the world about what's going on. And so when I'm talking about it, I'm talking about, look, your differences in the tax plans, things can go through reconciliation. So that actually might be in play if there's a trifecta, right? Versus some things that people want to do to build entire new things that might take 60 votes in the Senate. And how are you going to get that?
So, Derek, I guess, a lot of folks just are here in the U.S. are trying to figure out who is Kamala Harris? What does she stand for? What is the feeling on, you're in Singapore and that part of the world. Are people just grasping for knowledge about what this new candidate might mean?
Well, funnily enough, Kamala Harris comes with a hidden advantage in this part of the world, which is the fact that Joe Biden doesn't travel as much as a lot of presidents may have done in the past. And so Kamala Harris has actually stepped in for Biden on a lot of those things. So she's been to Singapore before. Okay. She's been to Indonesia. She's gone and done a lot of the rounds. So if you're talking about some leaders here, they actually feel like they know Harris a little bit more because they've met with her, they've interacted with her, and I've talked with diplomats here who have said, look, we have an idea of how to persuade her. I'll give you a quick example of this. Singapore, one of the things that it does for visiting dignitaries, it will give them an orchid that is like designed for that person, a specific like hybrid of orchid for them. Kamala Harris got one when she came here. Joe Biden's had one as well when he came as VP. But it really made an impression. And so the Singapore government, folks that I've talked with would say, oh, okay, let's file that away. That's something that we can know when we're dealing with her. It's little things like that, but they add up.
Derek, off your remit, maybe Tanya Chen's remit up in Hong Kong, but we're seeing Asian currencies, even Philippine peso comes in under 57 today. Sing dollar, I did a regression back to the pandemic, and it's coming down on 2 standard deviations of dollar Singapore. I mean, does a strong Sing dollar affect Singapore? Are you hoping for, how does that trend work?
Well, a strong Singapore dollar is actually pretty helpful in Singapore because we have so many things that are imports, so it makes it a lot cheaper to do other things. One of the things that we're finding is that there's an awful lot of travel. For example, Singapore dollar has been really strong against the yen, so there's been a ton of Japan travel there. But in terms of a really, really import-driven society, strong Singapore dollar is quite helpful. At the same point, you do get that like when is too high, and so you will get some questions. But I would say, across a lot of those economies, if you're talking about like Malaysia had been really, really low on their currency, that slight strengthening that you've seen recently has really been a breath of fresh air in their political system because it was starting to become a liability.
I just love this. I've never looked up yen Sing dollar in my life.
Here you go. You can
Derek
do it on the
Walbeck,
Bloomberg.
thank you so much. I got Sing dollar appreciation versus the Japanese yen from the worst of the pandemic, February 2020, 34%.
Wow.
Americans
so
have no idea.
Let's go over to
That's
Japan.
a perfect example of the richness of talking to Derek Walbeck. Derek,
Yep.
Thank you so much. A report from Singapore. See you at Fullerton's Bar. It's amazing. I have no idea what I'm talking about. The number of Singapore dollars as compared to Japanese yen, and it's gone from 1.36 down to 0.89.
Wow.
I'll never again look at that chart, but you can do that on the Bloomberg terminal.
You can do that on the Bloomberg terminal. Thank you, Tom.
That's like something Sass. Where's Sassower?
Yeah, where is he?
Wake him up.
Exactly. Yeah, he's not pitching his Sing dollars.
That's just amazing.
Yep. All right. Well, good stuff. So we got some reporting from literally the other side of the world in Singapore.
Have you had ice out at the beach? Like last night was a little chilly, huh?
Yeah, it was. It was a wonderful evening on the beach until about 5:30, and the clouds came in, but it was all good. Still very rough seas, Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of white water.
Lots of weather going on.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on there. So.
Last week, that heat that we had, remember that one morning?
Yep.
Or a stifling? That's the only time I've ever felt in New York like it feels in Singapore every day.
Every single day around
every day. Derek puts up with it every single day. Great shop in Singapore for Bloomberg. We say good morning to everyone across the Asian ring. Is it Osaka or Osaka?
Osaka.
In Japan.
Osaka?
I think I say Osaka.
Osaka.
What would the Rock say?
Yeah, what would the Rock say?
Osaka.
Exactly.
Thank you,
There
Lisa.
you go.
Good morning to Japan and Osaka.
Yep.
I went by Osaka on the high-speed train once.
Did you
really cool.
Yeah, I haven't done that.
It was out the right side window. It was like, oh.
Yep.
Look, it's
They
cool.
know what they're doing there in terms of the train travel.
It's a huge train. Yeah,
we have the Acela though.
Somebody said we have family friends going to Japan. They said, "What's the one thing we should do?" And it's fun. There's things up north that I told her are beautiful, which I've never done, but you got to go to Kyoto.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's Kyoto's like gorgeous. Is where the emperor is, and it's got all the stuff and lined up and that. It is a Tuesday, and the big
August.
economic data tomorrow. And then on to Jackson Hole. We'll have complete coverage. Lisa Abramowitz and myself, along with Michael McKee. Look for that on Friday, East Coast time, 9 a.m.
Wow.
I get to sleep in. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Booker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got red and green on the screen before central bankers gather for the Fed's Jackson Hole Economic Symposium this week. Right now, NASDAQ futures, little change, up about 15 points. Dow futures down about 16 points. S&P futures up about 3. We have the 2-year yield at 4.05%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 3.87%, and that is little change. To currencies, the dollar weaker, Japanese yen stronger, euro weaker, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin up more than 2.5% at 60,000. Shares of computer security service, Palo Alto Networks, they're higher. They're up about 2%. It reported quarterly profit outlook beat expectations, but the company also boosted its share buyback program. And another setback for Boeing. Yeah, shares down more than 1%. The company paused flight tests of its 777X jetliner. It's inspecting damaged engine mounts. Now, one analyst says that grounding, it could delay deliveries until 2026. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it, Lisa. In the racket, folks, there is one partition that we make, and that there's lots of fancy people with fancy titles. I've got a few of those. And then we have a subset of people who have real education. At the University of Wisconsin-Madison, you do that in accounting. And I can tell you that anytime you're in a meeting on Wall Street and somebody's got a duo-barrel CPA, CFA, everybody just shuts up and stops and listens. Janet Rilling joins us right now from Allspring, and she is one of the rare of rare CPA and CFA. Janet, my downfall was Whitefried Sandy. I've never gotten equipment leasing right. How do you use your accounting education, your CPA education every day in the study of fixed income?
Yeah, well, please don't quiz me on lease accounting. However, I certainly use that background day to day when we're looking at individual companies to invest in, understanding from the inside out how they operate. That auditing background that I had is quite useful.
Is the entertainment media for where Allspring sits, is that debt legitimate, accountable debt? Or is there so much bad will on this statement? I'm making up that name, Paul. There's so much bad will, Janet, that Allspring can't study the Disneys of the world?
Yeah, certainly that space is having some secular changes, and the management teams are navigating quite a bit of different competitive landscape. But within that, we do think there's resiliency in the business model. Something like Disney does have a high quality balance sheet, and that's pretty important when you have to navigate those secular changes.
So, Janet, we're going to hear from the Federal Reserve Chairman and a bunch of other economists out in Jackson Hole later this week. What do you expect to hear from our Federal Reserve Chairman this week?
Well, certainly the narrative and the data has been evolving and changing, and I think they're going to reflect that. We saw a growth scare in the early part of August when the July unemployment rate ticked up to 4.3%. Prior to that, the Fed had been shifting their focus from really much more to the inflation side of their dual mandate to something that's more balanced between inflation and jobs. And I think, we're not expecting any really big headlines coming from Jackson Hole, but I think there'll be the reiteration of data dependency and perhaps even more of a tilt to the risks in the job market. In other words, seeing more of that softening in the job market.
Where are we in terms of yield? If I look at the full faith and credit 10-year yield, and I know spreads have come in and all that, I got a yield right now, folks, of 3.87%. Are we within a range? Are we breaking through to a new lower territory? How do you frame that at Allspring?
Yeah, we do think we're in a range. Certainly, we broke out to 4.3% when that July unemployment number came out. But our expectation is we'll stay kind of around this 4%. And we think that's actually an attractive level for fixed income investors.
So, Janet, where do I go here in the fixed income space? I mean, you considered a 2-year treasury at, a little bit north of 4%. Do I stay there? Do I take some credit risk? And if I do want to take some credit risk, where?
Yeah, so first thing I'd say is we have been encouraging investors to move out of some of their cash and diversify their duration. Cash has been paying high yields, but we know over time the Fed's going to be bringing down rates, and that cash is going to reset at lower levels. So we have been encouraging moving out in the curve. The intermediate part of the curve we think is attractive, and overall yields are attractive on a historical basis.
Janet, on any series of the Lehman Barclays Bloomberg series, there was such a capital loss in fixed income. Do you frame that our listeners and viewers over time will catch up and get back on trend? Or do we just have to give it up, take the losses of the last 3 or 4 years, and make do with what we've got now?
Well, certainly 2022 was a rough year for fixed income investors, But I would say it's time to look forward, given the high level of yields. I mean, when we went into 2022, we were starting at much lower yields, and you didn't have the benefit of that carry or that income to offset capital losses. So today, yields are much higher. We may still have volatility in the level of rates, and there could be some increase in rates, which would be capital loss. But every day you have that income working for you, and that gives you a cushion in fixed income.
Jen Erling, thank you so much. With Allspring, greatly appreciated this morning. I mentioned there were entertainment stocks. I don't think you and I have talked about this. What is Mr. Bronfman doing?
I don't know. I mean, he's been sniffing around Paramount for a long time.
Like a year, 2 years.
Sure, absolutely. And, we've got to deal with Skydance, which is Mr. Ellison's son. And that deal is
one set of billionaires.
Yes, exactly. And that deal is pretty much all signed, sealed, and delivered. But there is a 45-day, kind of go shop period where Paramount can take other offers. And so Mr. Bronfman is maybe going to step in here. I think there's questions as to his commitment, questions as to his financing.
Do we know who's behind him?
I don't know. I don't know.
I haven't seen it.
No, I haven't seen it either. And again, this has been the whole, unfortunately, around this Paramount situation, you really haven't had any real credible bidders, and I'm including Skydance there, really stepping up and making a commitment to this company. So we'll see where we go here.
I was lost on streaming 6 months ago, and I'm completely lost now. Because I think I can get HBO and Max on Amazon, and I think they think I'm paying for it, but I'm not paying for it.
I don't know. Yep, you're right.
My head's spinning.
No, and then we had in the sports, just this week, we had Venue, which was going to be launched in a week or so with ESPN.
It's like now. I mean, NFL starts now.
Exactly, and that got blocked by the courts. And so what you have here is a lot of programming out there on a lot of different platforms. And I think consumers are paying more than they think they're paying. And so the convenience and the ease of understanding of your pay TV package has been, thrown, against the wall here. And nobody knows what they're paying for here. So we'll have to see. It's still shaking out.
You know what's great about working with you is you're not giving me any grief about the tots.
No.
If I'd walked in this morning with Farrell, first thing out of his mouth.
That's right. We started Premier League.
How'd that go?
Yep. So, I mean, I don't know.
I'm not even up to speed. Nobody on the team, I think, is there from last year. It's like a whole new team after all.
Well, yesterday they tied with Leicester City.
Yeah, we love
yesterday 1-1.
Leicester. Do you know why we like Leicester?
Yeah.
Our editor-in-chief he's in the seats behind the bench.
Okay.
For Leicester.
Player.
And he's got, you know how they look like car seats, like Porsche?
Yeah, very nice.
John's sitting in one of those seats with looks like a Porsche car seat.
That's where I want
That's
my
how large
editor-in-chief
he
there.
is.
Very good.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
All right. Nice.
So, Denise, you just missed our soccer talk for the day.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
I was going to tell your
Darn.
Tottenham Hotspurs.
We'll see. I got to look it up, see when the Tots play next. Maybe they can do better than tie.
No, they play Everton on Saturday.
Oh, that's
24th.
an important game, too.
Yes, Everton.
Do you know why Everton's important?
Why?
Because the chairman of the board of the company, the former governor of the Bank of England, bleeds.
Really? I did not
Everton
know that.
blue.
Okay, there you go.
I bust his chops. I'm like, when are you buying it?
Let's do a remote over there.
It's great. See, you've never done that much soccer talk
exactly.
in your life. With our news in New York City saving us, Denise Pellegrini.
Yeah, President Joe Biden delivering an emotional call, Tom and Paul, Lisa, for Democrats to rally behind Vice President Kamala Harris. Biden on opening night of the party's national convention in Chicago.
Selecting Kamala was the very first decision I made when I became our nominee. And it was the best decision I made my whole career. But she'll be a president our children can look up to.
And as I mentioned, the president getting emotional tears, dabbing tears from his eyes at times, saying that he really admires Harris. Harris making a surprise appearance at the podium.
Let us always remember, when we fight, we win. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. Good night, everyone.
Of course, aside from Harris, Hillary Clinton is the only other woman to have led a majority party presidential ticket in the U.S. She called on voters last night to help Harris shatter that glass ceiling.
I see the freedom to look our children in the eye and say, in America, you can go as far as your hard work and talent will take you, and mean it. And you know what? On the other side of that glass ceiling is Kamala Harris raising her hand and taking the oath of office as our 47th president of the United States.
And Hillary Clinton lost to Trump in 2016, of course, after leading in the polls for much of the race. A parade of social influencers also appearing on opening night at the DNC. And also, as we've been talking about, Golden State Warriors coach Steve Kerr paying homage to his star player while addressing the convention.
In the words of the great Steph Curry, we can tell Donald Trump, night-night.
NBA coach Steve Kerr there. We'll see what happens at tonight at the DNC and what other surprises we get there. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accepted a ceasefire proposal to halt the war in Gaza. The next step is for Hamas to say yes. And Donald Trump downplaying criticism he's undercut the Federal Reserve's autonomy, saying he should be able to freely share his views. Speaking to us here at Bloomberg, Trump says, quote, he thinks it's fine for a president to talk, but it doesn't mean that they have to listen to him. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Denise Pellegrini. This is Bloomberg. Tom.
Denise, thanks so much. Just Secretary Clinton's lecture in there, where we got to look and stare our children in the eye. Mm-hmm. And they're talking this highfalutin stuff. I'm staring there, looking our children in the eye, saying, empty the dishwasher.
Exactly.
And I'm getting nowhere.
Day-to-day stuff.
I mean, do your kids empty the dishwasher?
Yeah, begrudgingly. We kicked all our kids out, so they're done.
Oh, Pellegrini was tough.
They're out on their own.
Pellegrini kicked her kids out at 14.
Yeah.
I just sent them to your apartment.
They graduated.
But you don't have a dishwasher, right?
No, we did not.
That's a different. It was like Earth. It was like Earth. They lived in an igloo hut thing kind of.
It's a constant battle.
But in the Mateo household, I think Lisa Mateo runs that household.
Yes.
She runs it.
Everyone has their
tough.
chores. They got to do it. And if I go upstairs to come get you, you're not going to empty it. You're going to fill it too.
Of it. Wait, I'm afraid to ask. Do you have lists on the refrigerator?
No. They're in their head.
You haven't gone that far.
They're in their head.
Yep.
It's that time of year, folks, where we're getting our kids back to school. I sense more traffic on the streets.
Do you?
Just in the last 2 days.
Okay.
Taking the Bentley home. The Bentley came out of the garage. Great job.
Good.
And going up Park Avenue yesterday, there's just simply more traffic. It's like back to college.
A little bit back this September, yeah.
Back to kindergarten.
Yes.
Are you taking off Friday?
No.
Because
thanks to you guys are going out to Jackson Hole. I got to come in on a Friday in the summer, which is definitely not in my contract, in my agreement. But it's okay. It's good.
My word.
You guys are going to be out there in Jackson Hole. Lisa Bromwitz, Michael McKee breaking it down for us. That'll be great.
We'll get out there. Michael McKee with some really important conversations.
How do you
remember
get to Jackson Hole.
All right, you land at the airport and everybody thinks you go in next to the $1 Million Cowboy Bar. No, you go 40 minutes north, like a third of the way to Jellystone Park.
Yep.
In the middle of nowhere, there's at night, there's
Nothing.
bar.
Yeah.
It's in the middle of nowhere and it's 30 degrees in the morning. That's Jackson Hole.
There you go.
Futures up 5. Stay with us. Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got a mixed bag before the bell right now. NASDAQ futures up 0.1%, 20 points. Dow futures, little change, down 11 points. S&P futures, little change, up about 4. We have the 2-year yield at 4.04%, down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 3.86%, and that is little change. Quick check of commodities. We have spot gold, $2,525 an ounce. Brent crude, $77 a barrel. WTI crude, $74 a barrel. Shares of Eli Lilly up more than 1%. This is after a 3-year study had found patients taking its weight loss drug Zepbound were 94% less likely to develop diabetes. And Paul, not sure if this is going to affect you, but BMW recalling more than 720,000 vehicles due to a water pump issue. The X1, X3, X5 vehicles, some other models. Not sure if you're in that list there. Shares in Germany down about 0.2%. And a Vespa recall. Just kidding. I'm not. We're not going there. That is your Bloomberg Business.
Really
I know.
She's on topic today.
I know. All
Are you into BMW recall?
No. My BMW's perfect.
He got the 2002, 1972 vintage.
Yeah.
BMW. It's like hugely coveted. It's like huge.
All over.
Huge deal. As well. I just scheduled, folks. We're thrilled to bring in Dan Ives in an hour's time. Did you see NVIDIA? I mean,
no.
It's like the most expensive stock, so it has to go down. It went 140 to 100.
Okay.
And now it's back to 130.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Yep. There you go. That's your AI play for a lot of folks.
August 28th, I believe, is
why did they wait so long for those earnings?
Well, they do what they roll.
Everybody's going to have to come off the
their
beach
way.
for
I mean,
that
the present PE is 75.
Yep.
The view forward PE, January of next year, so out 5-6 months, is a 48.
Yep.
29,000. I think the big thing is there's 30,000 employees.
No, exactly.
People don't realize how small a company
But this is a stock that's earned its way into its multiple, which I have never seen. 66 buy ratings, 8 holds, no sells on the street. There you go.
You know, we'll
74 analysts.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
And Bloomberg Surveillance, who are brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Their portfolio analysts consolidate and analyze all your financial accounts on one powerful dashboard for free. Sign up for Portfolio Analyst at ibkr.com/free. PA, that's ibkr.com/free. PA. With our newspapers this morning, Lisa Mateo.
I want to expand about what you guys were talking about before, that Paramount deal. Editor Bronfman Jr., he put in this $4.3 billion bid for control of Paramount. But a lot of people say, how is this possible? With Skydance, didn't they agree to buy out Cherry Redstone? But it's that 45-day go shop provision. And that's kind of that reason why they're able to do this, Paul. I mean, I guess that's the reason how they're able to just step in when they had an offer before from.
Yeah, he's part of a bidding group, and Tom was asking about this before. He's part of a bidding group that includes the producer Stephen Paul, never heard of him, creator of the Baby Geniuses movie franchise, and that's according to 2 people familiar with the matter. So again, Mr. Bronfman, former head of Warner Music Group, heir to the Seagram fortune, certainly well known within the Hollywood circles and high finance. But how credible is this bid? I don't know.
Yeah, $4.3 billion. Paramount actually worth roughly $25 billion when it was created with that merger of Viacom CBS about 5 years ago.
So somebody in their households really never seen the whole Mel Gibson Mad Max thing. So we're having fun. We watched the original one. And last night we watched Mad Max 2. And, at the opening of it, Paul, the absolute first opening of it is the image of Paramount's studios in Hollywood.
Yeah.
The classic photograph of all of the emotion back to our grandparents Is that worth anything now?
Yeah, absolutely. The lots in the movie lots in Hollywood are very valuable, extraordinarily valuable. If nothing else,
for making movies or for real estate?
Both. And so the Fox lot, for example, the Warner Brothers lot,
and the Paramount lot at the beginning
lot.
of Mad Max 2.
Yep, exactly. So I mean, and those are all
very cool.
It's prime real estate. It's prime, just kind of the stuff you need to just make movies and TV shows.
Okay, next.
Okay, Tom, I'm not sure if you plan on visiting Yellowstone on your trip to Jackson Hole, but national parks, they have this problem. They have a lot of visitors, like more visitors, but they don't have enough staff. So people going to places like Zion National Park in Utah, Yellowstone too, they have longer wait times. They're waiting on these long lines for shuttle buses. They don't have enough staff to kind of keep up. So they're doing a few things. They're closing visitor centers. They're closing bathrooms. They're starting to notice that the trails are starting to get more crowded. And this is just becoming a growing problem because people enjoy the parks and they want to get to them, but there's just not enough people to man them. And then the budgets, too, are starting to dwindle.
Well, the budgets are there, but mostly it's just a wall of Americans taking advantage of Teddy Roosevelt's vision. And it's just, what do you do? And one school of thought I've seen is you got to limit, you have to have passes and limit when you can go. And
I think you got to pick your times when other people aren't going, but that's hard to do when you've got kids, you've got kids and you only have limited windows to go.
I mean, that was life-forming for me. I mean, we got in the car and went. And my parents thought nothing of driving across the country, halfway across the country, and there was always a park to go to. But now it's thousands and thousands of people.
Yellowstone is my fave.
Is it? You've been?
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's on my list. I have to do it.
Go to the tent cabins in Yellowstone Valley. Okay. So that you're kind of camping out, but it's a cabin, like a wooden floor.
So it's glamping.
Yes, and the tent cabins and the valley floor of Yellowstone, phenomenal experience. Kids,
kind of camping out.
Kind of
so
camping.
It's like
that's
the
not
Hassler,
like my camping.
It's like the Hassler in Rome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure, I got that right. Okay. Kind of camping.
Kind of camping. Yes, glamping. We've done it. Fire Island has glamping. We did that on the island. Okay, we've been talking about dating apps, right? The problems they're having, like Bumble, right? A lot of fewer people using them.
I gave up my subscription.
See, there you go. Prime example. The Washington Post says there's new kind of apps that are taking over, loneliness apps. I don't know if you want to call it that, or maybe friendship apps. So they're apps that people go to if they want to just have.
Where do you get this
stuff? It's the Washington Post. I'm telling you. You're working from home, and that's the problem. You don't have friends. You don't see anyone in person.
Why are you looking at me?
You're lonely. So you go on an app, like an app called, Breakfast. It's called The Breakfast. You go on it, you pay a fee, and you find someone who wants to sit and have a conversation with you. It could be a female looking for a female friend. It could be a guy looking for a bro hangout. Like, it's something like that people feel like they don't have anymore because they're lonely. And so these apps, The Breakfast, Time Left, Creative Lunch Club, they're even creating little gatherings of 6 people or more. So they each put their name in and they all get selected and they go on this, I guess you could say date, but it's not a date, it's just a meetup.
All right.
And so this is how people are doing it. But Bumble is seeing it. I mean, they acquired Geneva. That's an app to help people meet new friends. So Bumble is starting to see that trend too. So they're getting into that. So it's not dating, it's not networking, it's just friends.
The Breakfast.
That's it.
Meet Paul. We learn something every day from Lisa.
It's called The Breakfast
Meet
app.
new people over breakfast. Not dating or networking.
No.
It says this,
no
folks.
strings attached.
Not dating or networking, just breakfast.
Just breakfast. 17 cities worldwide for The Breakfast. All right. Can't you just go into a bar and meet people?
What's a movie where, I don't know, Nicole Kidman or somebody, or Billy Crystal, I think, lectures on that? It's not just breakfast. There's no such thing.
There's no such thing.
Thank you, Lisa. I learned something.
One more. Luxury trend at hotels is bunk beds. Bunk beds is the new trend. Luxury hotels like Marriott, Moxy, because consumers are looking for value. Hotels facing higher demand. So it's not just coming from the budget travelers, but also high-end travelers who just want this luxe vibe without having to book 2 different rooms. So they have everybody all in one space. Hotels can charge a little bit more for the rooms too, so it's kind of a win-win.
I mean, you just throw your kids in there, I guess? Is that the thing?
Yeah, but they're fancy bunk beds. They got it there. But the problem is that there's
they do look pretty cool. I'm looking at some of these. They look pretty
They are pretty nice.
Okay.
But, it's manufacturers can't keep up, so now there's a problem getting enough bunk beds.
Getting enough bunk beds.
Thank you. Lisa Mateo, the newspapers today. Chicago music in the modern age. We lost him in COVID. This is John Prine.
When I was a young girl, well, I had me a cowboy. He weren't much to look at, just a free rambling man.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo, Denise Pellegrini in for Michael Barr today. That's a good and beautiful thing. We say good morning. We're on Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. They're out with new software this fall. Looking forward to that. They're making Apple's particularly making a big splash about it. On YouTube, wow, we're looking at the numbers. Can't wait to see the August numbers. Thank you so much for the interest on YouTube. It is a digital revolution for a fossil like me. And the answer is you go out, you're on YouTube, you subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. It's got everything. It's got Kailey Leinz.
Does it? Wow.
Yeah, balance of power and the whole thing.
I would use that. Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
all there, all the different shows. Paul Sweeney with Matt Miller was there yesterday. And there it is on YouTube. And so thank you so much for the build out of those podcasts. And we say good evening to the Pacific Rim. We've been humbled by the international interest. Thank you to all of you from Tokyo, on down to Malaysia, and then over to India. Good evening to all of you as well. Red and green in the screen, futures up, but I don't know what to make about it. 8 days in a row up.
Yep.
This is like one big fake out at 2 p.m. Hello, buy orders going.
I mean, you think where we were a couple of weeks ago, Monday, there was a real sense of panic in the market there, but the market kind of steadied itself later in that day, and it's been nothing but up since, Tom.
Big change, dollar weaker, persistency to dollar weakness. Euro dollar's a wow statistic, 110.82. Getting near 111, stronger euro. Jeffrey BNY Mellon was with us saying, forget about it, weaker euro in store. A really important conversation coming up in moments. Lakshman Achathan joins us with ECRI, and we'll talk about Europe as the fake out of September. It's time for the Bloomberg Business Flash from the Interactive Broker Studios. Lisa Mateo.
You got it. And traders, they're taking a bit of a break after Monday's session lifted the S&P 500 eighth day in a row. Tom said we have NASDAQ futures, little change, up about 12 points. Dow futures, little change, down about 8 points. S&P futures up about 4. We have the 2-year yield at 4.04%, down 2 basis points. A yield on the 10-year 3.87%, and that is little change. Commodities, gold top $2,500 an ounce on expectations. The Fed is set to cut interest rates right now. We have spot gold $2,523 an ounce. Over to oil, Brent crude $77 a barrel, WTI crude $74 a barrel. To earnings we go. Shares of Lowe's, they were lower, now seeing a bit of an uptick, up about 0.2%. This is despite lowering its full year guidance on softer DIY spending. And a few companies making news, sources saying Apple will make its first India-made iPhone Pro models this year. Apple shares are little changed. And the European Union said it plans to introduce a 9% tariff on Teslas imported from China, but shares are up about 0.5%. That could be because that tariff is actually lower than the duty rate of other manufacturers that they're facing. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. There is a way that Jeffrey Moore wrote his letter that my grandparents literally subscribed to 300 years ago. It's still written the same way. Economic Cycle Research Institute subscribed to it. It's an incredibly elegiac thing. And what's great about it, which you know drives me nuts, Lakshman Achathan isn't taking data to 3 decimal points. No. Where did we get, Lakshman? I mean, okay, I'll give him a 10th. Unemployment's 4.2%. What is this disease that you fight against every day of 3 and 4 decimal points?
You know, with my dad's a physicist, so no knock on physicists, but economists have physics envy.
Yes.
Right? They want it to be a hard science. It's not a hard science. It's a there's a mix of hard data in there. There's a mix of psychology in there. Fear and greed are parts of what's driving this driving the economy.
I would call it Newtonian envy with plug and chug certitude. Forget about it.
Yeah.
Your key paragraph is central banks are on for a big fake out. Inflation will endure, for example, in Europe. Discuss.
Yeah. So look, the main thing is that inflation is cyclical. It doesn't go down and stay flat just because you want it to or because your model says it will. If you observe it over time, there's an inflation cycle. It's distinct from the economic cycle, business cycle. It's different, which is why we have a different set of leading indicators for inflation cycles ever since the 1970s. Ding, ding. Remember that?
Yeah, sure.
And these inflation cycle indicators for Europe, okay, we have them for all the major economies, but for Europe, clear inflation upturn in the future inflation gauge for Europe. That already happened. That's baked in the cake. That's done. So now we're watching the coincident data, CPI, core, whatever, and those look to our eye like they're turning up. Most people look at year over year. They get into the innards and say, oh, maybe it's a little higher than we thought. I think the ECB got caught up saying they were doing a hawkish cut last time because the data went up when they were cutting. Now, looking at smooth growth rates, which are a little bit better for cycle directional vector changes, we see that headline Eurozone CPI growth is up to 2.8%. It troughed at 2.2 back in March. Core is up to 3.5%, troughing at 2.4% back in January. So that looks like nascent cyclical upturns in the inflation cycle
in the Eurozone. Now, that's inconvenient for pretty much all central banks which are cut and want to cut.
And Paul, from a different perspective, Jeffrey Yu came to the same conclusion. Jeffrey Yu's looking 110, 111 euro, weaker to 105.
Yeah.
So, out in Jackson Hole this week, can Fed Chair Jay Powell, can he do a victory lap? Can he pat himself on the back here on the soft landing?
Oh, now we're switching to, jawboning from cycle forecasting. So for jawboning, by all means, do a victory lap. Hey, it went down. Inflation has gone down. Let's not focus too much on the fact that in the U.S., a huge part of why core goods have come down is because you have an 11% deflation, in used car prices. The 2.3% drop in used cars prices in July, which is driving core goods down, which is holding year over year down. But again, if you look at the forward data, much stickier. It does not imply that we're going down to a nice, neat 2% number or whatever and hanging out there. I don't know what the ultimate number is going to be, but I do know it's going to turn up at some point. Our forward data is not falling. If anything, it's kind of edging up. And knowing that inflation is cyclical, I'm on full alert. What's more concerning is that you're getting a risk. You have a decent risk of a higher low in the inflation cycle. In other words, the floor of inflation may be getting higher than it was earlier.
That's what frustrates, I think, consumers in the grocery store.
Yeah.
They're saying, I saw in the news last night that inflation's moderating. We're down to almost normal lows. Wait a minute. I'm getting crushed in the grocery store.
Oh, now that's fun. So what happens is, look, ultimately downturns in economic growth can weigh on inflation, but not so much the price level.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I want to get this in quickly.
Yeah.
I think it's just too important. Take me, and don't give me some Condor Chief stuff.
Okay.
It's August.
Okay.
We do Condor Chief cycles in November. That's it. Just before the holidays. Lachman, a bull market like we're in right now, does that help? Can you do cycle analysis of this crazy bull market we're in?
Well, look, again, I'm not going to go to any decimal points. This is
Thank
fuzzy,
God
big.
for that.
This is big picture
Can you
stuff.
book him in? I want him here every Tuesday. Slot him
But directional stuff. Here, if you're having a slowdown, a growth rate cycle slowdown, not a recession, just slowing, then ever since the GFC, which is ancient history now, you tend to have corrections. You can have sizable corrections, maybe 10% or something like that, but they don't persist. So not a full-blown bear market. Now, if you're looking for a full-blown bear market, you need to be talking about a hard landing, a recession, something that's going to endure. And in order for that to happen, I'm going to end with Jeffrey Moore here. The big insight is you need a cyclical window of vulnerability combining with a negative shock. You need those two ingredients to get your recession, to get your bear market. I don't see that here. We didn't see it. We didn't see it when the market was jittery a couple of weeks ago.
I'm glad GFC's ancient for you. I bought this bow tie at Talbot's, Roger Talbot's, on Madison Avenue in the heart of the great financial crisis. I wore it today just for Lachman.
Nice.
Well,
with equity.
It's inflated.
Economic I'm sure it is. Economic Cycle Research Institute. Go to them for their wonderful literature. With our news in New York City, Denise Pellegrini.
All right. Thank you, Tom. President Biden delivering really an emotional call for Democrats to rally behind Vice President Kamala Harris. Biden on the opening night of the party's national convention in Chicago.
It's been the honor of my lifetime to serve as your president. I love the job, but I love my country more.
And the president at times dabbing tears from his eyes. Harris making a surprise appearance.
Democracy has prevailed. Democracy has delivered. And now democracy must be preserved.
And that's Biden there talking about Harris. Biden also casting his decision to exit as the natural conclusion of his career. And Biden telling reporters he remains hopeful about a ceasefire deal to end the Israeli-Hamas war in Gaza. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in the region. He says Israel has accepted a ceasefire proposal. Here's Blinken. He's pressuring Hamas to do the same.
The fierce urgency of now, that's what I think we're all feeling. And we do see this as the best opportunity to finally get this over the finish line. we'll never give up on it, but the challenge is the longer this goes on, the more hostages will suffer and possibly perish, and the more other things happen that could make things impossible.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken there, and he goes next to Egypt. There's also talk he may go to Qatar. And in sports, the Mets giving proof of life, you might say, beating the Orioles 4-3 as they start a marathon.
Exactly.
10 games. I mean, guys, they have 10 games in 10 days. We do know they're still alive. They're trying.
Yeah, bring back Lenny Dykstra.
I'm trying. The Yankees play Cleveland tonight in New York. Global news 24 hours a day. And whatever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Denise Pellegrini, and this is Bloomberg. Paul, Tom, Lisa.
On economics, David Ingles, of course, holding court in Hong Kong for Bloomberg, does a great job with the team in the mornings there. So they got a weaker dollar, and all of a sudden they got buoyant currencies. So David Ingles is feeling large. And the food courts improved in Hong Kong.
Oh, nice.
They have the Korean cookie. Okay, I don't know what that is. And the seaweed roll.
Seaweed roll.
Do we have seaweed roll here at our famed food court?
I don't think we have seaweed rolls. We had the cheese puff yesterday, which was
quite
very good.
Yes.
Very good.
I had a brace.
Did you?
A brace of them. I embarrassed myself.
Okay.
HR whispered in my ear, "That's too many, Mr.
Yes, too many."
But they
take care of us. That's for sure.
Thank you to David Ingles for look. He's holding the bag up. This is out on Twitter. David Ingles, TV.
Okay.
Seaweed roll.
Yep.
Would you?
No, thank you.
Yeah,
I don't do kale either.
How come I know no one in the control room? Is it August? Is that what that's about?
Well, yeah, some new folks in there.
New folks are in there.
Yeah.
Are they union?
I think, yeah, exactly. I don't think so.
We'll have to see. Red and green on the screen. Futures of 5. Dow futures go the other way, negative 16. The 2-year yield, the Sweeney yield, elevated 4.04%.
Really? All right, I'll take that.
You do a redo.
Yeah, I know exactly. Right there, 2 years, 4%, no problem. It's not the 5% we had before. That was a real gift there for a short period of time that people locked up, including my daughter. She locked up her 5.25% from the good friends at Marcus.
10-year yield, 3.86%. That'll be important as we go to Friday. And the speech of the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Bramo, will be there. From New York City, this is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures, well, trying to keep that momentum from yesterday's session going strong. It's going to be a tough battle, though. Investors feel more confident the Federal Reserve will soon signal it's ready to start cutting interest rates. So we have NASDAQ futures, little change, up about 17 points. Dow futures, little change there, down 13 points. S&P futures up about 5. We have the 2-year yield at 4.04%. That's down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.86%, and that's little changed. Now, remember that Couche-Tard bid for Seven & I we spoke about yesterday? Well, the Financial Times says they could face U.S. antitrust charges. Sources saying that combo of the operator of Circle K brand and the Japanese operator of 7-Eleven, well, that could increase prices for consumers and also damage the labor market. So you have Couche-Tard right now down 2% in Canada. 7AI, yesterday at this time, it was up about 20%, now down 10% in Japan. And a win for Alaska Air Hawaiian Holdings. The Justice Department decided against challenging their $1.9 billion merger, but the carriers still need that approval from the Department of Transportation, so we'll wait and see on that. Alaska Air up nearly 1%, Hawaiian Holdings up 11%. And Kroger looking to block the FTC's in-house case against its proposed purchase of Albertsons. Kroger says it's unconstitutional. Kroger down 0.2%, Albertsons up 0.2%. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much for putting that in there. Paul, Kroger and Albertson, have they been trying to merge for like 40 years?
Forever. What's going on here? I mean, Jen Rhee from Bloomberg Intelligence, she's an antitrust expert there. She called this from day one. This is going to be tough to do. Even if you say, oh, we're going to divest these stores in these markets, which seems like an easy fix. To me, I don't get what the big deal is. But
it's a geography thing. In the Midwest and the West, these are the two places you go.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
It's a huge overlap.
Piggly Wiggly down in the South, but that's a whole other story.
To you.
Exactly. Durham, North Carolina, Piggly Wiggly, they loved me there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very impressive. The next 30 minutes are important for Global Wall Street. You know, we're having fun. It's August and all that. Forget about it. The next 30 minutes, really important conversation. Anna Wong will join us, chief economist at Bloomberg. She has been brilliant on the revisions coming to the job market. And joining us now in the same space of investment and finance with BlackRock, Kate Moore joins us, thematic strategy at BlackRock, their global allocation team. Kate Moore, to your immense credit, you've said you have to participate in this bull market. How do you readjust with the oddity of the last 12 trading days?
Well, first, let me say I'm glad we're at these levels that rather than where we were 12 or 14 days ago, Tom. But let me say this. I think a couple things happened after that massive technical washout. First and foremost was that we got a slew of good earnings. And we can come back to this, but earnings on balance for the second quarter have been very solid. I mean, there's no question. And that really helped to comfort a lot of scared investors and people who were shaky.
Okay, is that going to expand? I mean, the money question here for BlackRock is, does the earnings persistency, the excellence of it, the double-digitness of it, does it extend into Q4?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's a big question mark there, Tom, because two things happened during reporting. First, companies really beat on the bottom line. That's where we got the double digits earnings growth for the second quarter. But the revenue side was just okay. So companies were really working all the levers. They were really controlling their costs. They were really trying to deliver on the EPS. That said, you know, it's not that easy as you go on quarter after quarter of doing that. So I'd like to see solid revenue growth going forward, and that's going to be a question mark. And then the second thing that happened during earnings season that wasn't perfect, I would say, is that analysts started to revise down a little bit their expectations for 12-month forward earnings. Now, this is not catastrophic. We tend to get analysts, you know, coming in with forecasts that are lower than actual. The typical pattern is to beat analysts' expectations, but these two things happening at the same time, where revenues were just okay and companies were really controlling their costs to get to earnings and downward revisions to future quarters. We got to watch that as we go into third quarter reporting and into the fourth quarter.
So, Kate, you know, one of the concerns in this market has been concentration risk. We've got the Magnificent Seven representing such a big part of the market, a big part of the valuation. Is that a concern for you guys at BlackRock or not so much?
Well, I would be concerned about concentration risk if the companies that were dominating returns, that were dominating headlines, and had grown in market cap weren't also putting up the numbers.
Yep.
These are companies that are cash rich, that are generating a lot of free cash flow, that deliver on earnings, and are, very importantly, in segments of the economy and the market where we expect to see a significant amount of growth regardless of the economic backdrop. So, I'm a little bit less stressed about the concentration. That said, we need these incredibly powerful companies dominating market cap, dominating earnings to continue to deliver. And of course, next week, we're going to get some important earnings from one of those names.
Right, exactly. All right, Kate, head of thematic strategy at BlackRock, global allocation. How do you guys think about global allocation? Is it the U.S. market overweight simply for the tech play, or do you look to Europe for value? How do you guys think about that global allocation at BlackRock?
Yeah, on the equity side, we, of course, can toggle up and down between any kind of country weight. But we have been and continue to be overweight the U.S. for one of the reasons you mentioned, not specifically because of tech, but because we have companies that innovate. We have a dynamism in the corporate sector here that doesn't exist in other places. And we have companies, to the point we were just talking about on earnings, very, very focused on delivering earnings for their investors. So that kind of mentality,
right,
that psychology doesn't exist everywhere else. So we want to choose better companies in each of these regions instead of going overweight a specific region. It's why we kind of cherry pick and pick our spots in Europe.
I mean, Kay, you did this at UVA and then in political economy at Chicago. And the basic thing here is the heritage of innovation and technology overlay. When you look at all the economic mumbo jumbo that's out there, the certitude about a productivity we're not going to know about in 5 years out or whatever, do we just grossly underestimate the efficacious benefit of technology in America?
Yeah, Tom, I think that's the question, because we get these people coming out there and saying, hey, look, all these companies are investing in AI, they're buying chips, they're buying hardware, they're adding people to their workforce to really bolster up their technology capabilities. And I don't see the return on investment right now. And I say that's not exactly how it works. You have to train the workforce, you have to train the models, and you have to really integrate all these new technologies into your systems and daily operations. I am incredibly, incredibly optimistic about the impact that some of this revolutionary technology is going to have on productivity going forward. I got to tell you, Tom, I mean, even in the recent past, Kate Moore's personal productivity has improved by using some of these tools.
Oh, come on. She's worked from home 8 days a week. That's where the productivity's going. Paul,
but it is the 8 days a week, Tom. Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
Kate, real quick, 30 seconds. What's kind of your best idea these days when you hop on the phone with the clients?
Yeah, I think there are two things that I'm pretty excited about. Number one, I think there are derivatives on the technology side outside of those key semis and hardware names that people have been crowded in. We really are interested in expanding some of our exposure around power and energy, which I think has a huge upside, not just for the data centers, but also for global infrastructure. And I would say we're seeing increasing opportunities in areas of healthcare and selective areas of consumer, those that have the best business models that can deliver in a slower growth environment.
Kate, thank you. Kate Moore, to get us started with a brilliant half hour here. She is with BlackRock. And I think the dovetail here with Anna Wong, I can't say enough. The impact, I mean, Kate Moore's impact is every day worldwide for BlackRock clients. But Anna Wong, I mean, she deserves,
absolutely.
I don't know if she's going to Jackson Hole. We'll have to ask her. She deserves to go to Jackson Hole.
She'd be one of the smarter folks in the room.
And they'd shut up and listen to her.
You get a PhD, as Anna Wong did, from the University of Chicago. That's just a lot of math, I think. And that's just not where I want to go.
Mostly it's about acuity. It's microeconomics is the religion out there.
Yep.
Going back to Frank Knight.
So good.
And the answer is the acuity of it. That's what we try to get out of our guests every day. People like Jeffrey Yu, Lachman Atherton. We're working at it. I mean, I don't know anybody in the control room, but other than that, we're working at it.
They're in charge.
It's August. Red and green on the screen. The VIX 15.01. From New York City, nationwide, Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got a mix of red and green on the screen, and this is before central bankers gather for the Fed's Jackson Hole Economic Symposium this week. We have NASDAQ futures, little changed, up about 12 points. Dow futures, little change, down about 30. S&P futures, up about 3. We have the 2-year yield at 4.04%. That's down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 3.86%, and that's down 1 basis point. We have the dollar weaker. Japanese yen up about 0.1% at 146.36 against the dollar. We have the British pound higher, stronger. Bitcoin up about 2.5% at 60,000. I want to head back to Kroger. We just told you how Kroger was looking to block the FTC's case against its merger with Albertsons. Well, now we're learning Kroger has kicked off a dollar bond sale to fund its Albertsons tie-up. Sources saying they're looking to sell debt in as many as 7 parts, and the size may be around $10 billion. We have Kroger shares down about 0.2%. And another setback for Boeing, shares down more than 1%. The company paused flight tests of its 777X jetliner. It has to inspect the damaged engine mount. That's the problem. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Anna Wong joins now. Dr. Wong is head of U.S. economics for Bloomberg, and thrilled she could be with us. She has changed the dialogue nationwide on labor economics in this 2024. And if I go to the classic ECO screen, I know you never look at it, it's beneath you to look at it. I go back to August 2nd, and I see a revision of 111,000, and then a new revision will be revised again, I get it, of negative 29,000 as well. What do the revisions lower of fewer non-farm payrolls, what do they look like into 2025?
In 2025, yes. Okay, so this Wednesday we're going to get the revisions for 2023. For 2024's revision, really, you're not getting until early 2026. So, but yes, I think in real time, Tom, even though the payrolls, the July payroll is 114,000, I think eventually it is going to be revised down very, very close to zero. We're going to get a lot of incremental revisions in the next few months. And note that the response rate for the July payroll is very low. It was under 60%. It was one of the lowest July response rates since the 1990s. So I think that by the end of this year, we would probably have a good idea that the payrolls in July was much weaker. In fact, the April 2024 payroll would be even weaker and possibly very close to zero.
Does anybody at the Eccles building agree with you?
I think they're certainly paying a lot of attention to this. And, having worked in the government in both Eccles building and the Treasury building and the White House building, I would say that the firm that has the biggest influence in the federal government is Goldman Sachs. So as long as Goldman Sachs
you're willing to say that.
You're willing to
whoa, this is important. You're willing to say that Jan Hatzius is a closet governor of the Federal Reserve System?
I think it's a fact, Tom. We have to acknowledge the fact, and so I think that Goldman does have a disproportionate influence on how government thinks about things. So yeah, the Fed will be paying attention to this.
All right, folks. For Anna Wong, you know her as the chief U.S. economist of Bloomberg LP, but prior to that, she was a principal economist at the Federal Reserve Board. Boom, chief international economist at the White House Council of Economic Advisors. Okay. Deputy Director of Office of International Economic Analysis at the U.S. Treasury. So, Anna, you know of what you speak here. Given that backdrop, given your thoughts on the labor market, maybe not as robust as people believe, is the Federal Reserve, are they behind the curve? If so, how much in terms of loosening financial conditions?
I think first they need to get behind the curve of the forecasting part. So if you look at the FOMC minutes, and we're going to get another set of minutes tomorrow from the Fed, but in the last 2 minutes, we have seen the Fed staff actually has been forecasting for the unemployment rate to decline. So they must be very busy revising their forecast right now, figuring out why was the unemployment rate so surprisingly high. So the median FOMC participant forecasted 4.0% unemployment rate at the end of this year. And we are now at 4.3%. And I think based on this trajectory, we should be at 4.5 at least by the end of the year. So that means that the Fed is behind on the curve by about 70 basis points in terms of rate cuts by my estimation.
And now, folks, we go where she doesn't want to go, but Dr. Wong will be a participant and play along with us. Did you study with John Cochran at Booth, Chicago?
Actually, I did take a class with him, yes.
You survived John Cochran, great. The Democratic Party, led by the Vice President of the United States, is trying to go after businesses for price fixing, price gouging, price control seem to be the solution. Frank Knight rolled over in his grave, as did Milton Friedman. Dr. Wong, what is the efficacy, what is the history of forms of price control in America?
Well, the economic theory would say price control tends to reduce supply and actually create shortages. So because it reduces incentives for supplier to provide. So I think it's not a very wise economic policy.
And is it not wise, maybe something like what we hear from Professor Kelton on MMT, because not only is it a flawed policy, many would say, but even if you did the policy, it's hard to execute price controls within a society, isn't it?
You know, I remember one of Milton Friedman's criticism of government spending is that even if it begins with good intention, it's very hard to sunset government spending. Once you start getting into it, it's hard to increase efficiency of government spending. And we are already CHIPS Act is a great initiative, I think, and on a national security basis is required. But already we are seeing a lot of the factories that started under CHIPS Act, they're either stalled, delay, or very slow. And it's just that the private sector just works better than the government sector. And I think there is some good policy to be crafted that can think about how to incentivize the private sector to provide for these positive externalities that they are not they're under investing in.
Hey, Anna, it's an election year for better or worse, so we're going to get a lot of rhetoric about deficits, the national debt, the 35 trillion or whatever the number is. As a trained economist, tell us when we need to start caring about this stuff.
I think that the government is, I think both sides of the party looks like they are very much willing to spend. At the end of the day, it would be Wall Street who will be imposing the discipline on the government. So we probably need the bond vigilantes back if the Congress is not going to impose the fiscal discipline they need.
What do you expect from Jackson Hole? Help me out here. Brammo and I are going to be there. They're going to come out. They do the walk. It's going to. I believe Governor Bailey will be there from the Bank of England. And
very good.
They'll probably, they get McKee to make the walk if nobody shows up. But Anna, what do you expect from this speech? To me, it's a massive do no harm speech.
I think Powell will declare that the balance of risk between the full employment and a price stability mandate is about even now. And we have completed, the economy has completed the process of normalization. And basically, he just, I think it's a green light for rate cuts in the future.
Anna Wong, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. And seriously, congratulations. We're into August. I had Neil Dudd as Economist of the Year last year with his inherent optimism on the American experiment. Wong is shortlisted. I mean, she's killing it.
Yeah, she is. She's just awesome.
Just killing it.
And we appreciate getting a few minutes of her time when we need it.
Did you see 114,000? And I believe she's taken it down to zero.
Yeah.
That's where David Kelly, J.P. Morgan was there, months ago. It's amazing. Dr. Wong, head of U.S. Economics, for Bloomberg. Red and green on the screen. The VIX elevated 15.07. With our news in New York City, Denise Pellegrini.
All right, thank you, Tom. Opening night of the party's national convention, Democrats' national convention in Chicago. President Biden delivering a really emotional call for Democrats to rally behind Vice President Kamala Harris.
Selecting Kamala was the very first decision I made when I became our nominee. And it was the best decision I made my whole career. And she'll be a president our children can look up to.
And the president at times really dabbing tears from his eyes. Harris made a surprise appearance.
Let us always remember, when we fight, we win. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. Good night, everyone.
And Vice President Kamala Harris there at the Democratic National Convention, day one, day two. A lot of different speakers, including a lot of people who had been speculated to be her choice to be her running mate. We'll be hearing from them tonight. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accepted a ceasefire proposal to halt the war in Gaza. And the next step is for Hamas to say yes. Blinken met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday, pushing for a ceasefire deal. And Nomi Bar Yaakov, an associate fellow at the British think tank Chatham House, tells us she believes the diplomat is really getting tired of stalling.
I think the US has lost patience with its allies' behavior. And I think they're going to hopefully inflict a cost, not just leverage, but a cost that Israel won't be able to fathom if they do not.
Meantime, Egypt and Qatar are places where Blinken will go next as Blinken continues to pressure Hamas to bring the war to an end. And a bird in the hand could be worth two in your pocket, guys, with these small decorative birds that Target is selling for $5 each. They're made of plastic, foam, polyester. They kind of change them depending on the season. Collectors charge into Target stores on the day these birds come out. They go for about $5 each, as I mentioned. Kind of like the old doorbusters that we used to see. But the thing is, if you resell it on eBay, you can probably pay for your kids' college.
No kidding.
Yeah. And they are not nice looking either.
No, okay.
They are really tacky. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Denise Pellegrini. This is Bloomberg. Paul, Tom, Lisa, back over to you guys.
There's this delusion out on social that, like Jackson Hole's Deluxe, like Anne-Marie Horton said to me, she mentioned something like $1,000 a night spa luxe thing in Jackson.
Yeah.
Near the $1 million.
Is that what you're doing?
No.
You're not doing that. Okay, of course not.
We're folks.
Why not?
Long ago and far away, our parents drove across the country, and the nation had built these parks with lodges and cabins. So I'm out there, and Farrow thinks he's going we're out with John Farrow, and he figures it's going to be like the Dorchester in London.
Okay.
And he's got spider webs in the sink, and you're looking under your bed for snakes. And, it's like rustic. I mean, it's like...
But I'm calling it rustic chic. I mean, it is nice out there in some of those resorts.
Well,
you're not roughing it, my friend.
It's rustic, but I mean, Joe Weisenthal and Tracy, they do the whole thing.
Oh, they do the whole thing. Yeah.
They got the whole Brooklyn thing with the $800 blue jeans and the, the plaid shirt. I mean,
What I want to know is, are they sleeping in bunk beds? Because Bloomberg's got this story out on the terminal today about how that's the latest luxury thing.
Exactly. I can't go on the top bunk bed. It'll be like the Three Stooges.
You don't even fit on the bottom.
No, I don't fit on the bottom. No, but it's rustic. It's like really like the Pioneer Grill.
Western cowboy. Yep.
I'm going to have I've never had the trout and eggs.
Okay.
But I'm going to have it this year. Just
Definitely.
Why not?
Before why not?
Get some venison, some bison, a bison burger.
Mike does that. I don't do that. I don't.
And what do you wash it down with?
What do you? Oh, listen to you.
A big
hearty. You go over to the acclaimed Colby Smith Bar, and you begin with Ford's Gin. From New York, Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got a bit of a mixed bag before the bell as investors kind of await clues on interest rate cuts from the Fed. Right now, NASDAQ futures, little change, down about a point. Dow futures down about 36 points. We have S&P futures, little changed, up about a point. We have the two-year yield, 4.03%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 3.85%, and that's down 2 basis points. We have spot gold higher, $2,526 an ounce. Brent crude, $77 a barrel. WTI crude, $74 a barrel. Johnson & Johnson boosting its efforts to treat heart failure. The company will pay as much as $1.7 billion for heart tech firm V-Wave. J&J shares up about 0.3%. And shares of Eli Lilly up more than 1%. A 3-year study found patients taking its weight loss shot Zepbound were 94% less likely to develop diabetes. And shares of computer security service Palo Alto Networks higher, up more than 1%. It reported a quarterly profit outlook, beat expectations, and the company also boosted its share buyback program. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much. Hugely anticipated. We welcome the show Daniel Ives of Wedbush here on any number of things, I guess Tesla and that. But Dan Ives, I'm going to Apple. When I do my research at home, when Paul does his research out at the cottage, the answer is it's the mother of all upgrade seasons for iPhones. Am I right? And how does a pro like you determine the unit manufacturer of those iPhones we're going to buy in September and October?
Yeah, Tom, I mean, we just got back from Asia. We'll be there in 2 more weeks. It's really shown what we're seeing in the supply chain. And it started off, the reason this is an AI-driven super cycle, it started off as 80 million units in terms of in what Apple was ultimately ordering, and now it's up to 90 million. And I think as that trajectory continues, we could be looking over 240 million iPhones sold in 2025. That would be a historical year for Cupertino.
Do you assume the same distribution, which is through the wireless phone companies where they're competing and will give our listeners and viewers a deal spread out over months? Is it business as usual, or is there a new twist to Sweeney having to buy 7 iPhones?
Well, no, look, I think the reason Sweeney and others are going to upgrade, because you have 300 million that haven't upgraded their iPhones in 4+ years.
Is Tucker on that list?
Probably. And we expect what I would call game-changing promotions, from U.S. carriers for this, and that's why you look at the stock continues to move higher. I think there's a stock that has a 3 in front of it as we go into called the next 9-12 months.
Dan, you mentioned you were in Asia and heading back in a couple of weeks. Give us the update. Give us the latest on Apple's competitive position in China.
Look, China's the hearts and lungs of the Apple story. I mean, 20% iPhone demand, that's been negative growth the last, 4 or 5 quarters. Everything we're seeing, we now will see growth. That could be ultimately double-digit growth. And China is really now going to be a key to driving this upgrade cycle. And that's everything we see through the supply chain. Clearly, you had the geopolitical headwinds, but I do believe a lot of that's abated. They played nice in the sandbox in Beijing, and I think that's benefited.
So, Dan, talk to us about for Apple, the services story here. For the longest time, analysts like yourself have been saying, really focus on the services, because that's really where some of the really good margin is. What's your call on the services revenue line for Apple?
Look, Paul, I think that's been a lot of the bears that are in those hibernation mode that have missed Apple the last, decade, especially the last few years. It's missing the services piece. It's been a re-rating. That's $100 billion of revenue growing mid-teens, double the margins of the hardware business. And I believe that alone, based on all of our math, is worth 1.5 to 1.7 trillion. And that's ultimately how we get to a $4 trillion market cap for Apple as we go in 2025.
I mean, I'm looking here, Paul. You can do this on the Bloomberg Professional Service, but I'm looking at 12 months to, I'm eyeballing this, folks. Don't get me to the third decimal point. Up 32% for Dan Ives.
Exactly.
With a 3 handle.
And so, yeah,
300.
Dan, let's go to that topic that Tom just brought up. I mean, the stock since April is up about close to 40%, 35% here. What's going on there?
Look, we've talked about a lot on your show. I think it's investors seeing forest through the trees. It's not about the March quarter, the June quarter. It's about going into historical AI-driven super cycle. And look, betting against Cook and Cupertino, with the biggest install base in the world, 2.2 billion iPhones, into an AI-driven consumer cycle,
right.
That's just a bad bet. And I think that's really been what's driving it.
What's your growth rate on services?
14 to 15%.
Really, that high?
Look, it's that high. And I'd also say, Tom, that they've gained the 100 million iPhones the last 18 months. That's just more and more services. So you start to look at that flywheel, we could be looking at 2.4, 2.5 billion iOS devices in the next year.
How do you respond to Paul Sweeney trying to game, I need to buy it in September, October, or I need to wait for, I think it's iPhone 17. Will people wait for the next toy, or is this it?
No, because I think, look, Paul's going to be sitting there on the golf course. His friends are going to be showing him things they could do on iPhone 16. And he's like, oh, I want to do that. But he's not going to be able to wait. And I think that ultimately, you could have some that wait till iPhone 17. Most will upgrade in iPhone 16. That's why this is the AI-driven super cycle in front of us.
Should we ask a question on Tesla?
Yeah, we could do that. I mean, Dan, we saw some news out on the Bloomberg terminal today. I don't know, the EU is putting some tariffs on Teslas coming out of China. What's going on there? Do we care?
Yeah, well, but that's down from 20%. Basically, they halved it.
Okay.
And I think it shows that they're going to have an advantage versus other Chinese players going into Europe, because that's what you look at NIO, Xpeng, BYD. They're focused on Europe. That gives an advantage to Tesla.
You're probably the only one alive who's been in all those different cars. Which one is the best fit and finish?
Look, I continue to believe Tesla stands out front and center, but BYD, it is a special vehicle. It's a special company. And this is not mutually exclusive. They will be a big beneficiary in terms of what we see in China.
Will there be remorse if NASDAQ 100 breaks through to new highs? We're almost there. But what will long-only buy side do? How will they behave with all-time highs out there, perhaps?
I think they're caught off sides. Because in terms of from a buy side perspective, numbers are going higher across the board in tech. And I think you're going to see them chasing this into year end, which is why I think we have a NASDAQ 20,000 as we go in 2025.
There you go. And Dan, Tom's been all over this AI story. We got NVIDIA next week. What should, the amateurs like me, what should I be looking for?
Look, I think you get the popcorn ready, because when the godfather of AI, Jensen, speaks, it's going to talk about demand accelerating. That's everything we're seeing in Asia. And there could be some knee-jerk reactions, but I think, look, this is a stock that goes higher. And I think it just shows, look at NVIDIA, look at Palantir, look at Microsoft. The tea leaves are there.
For those of you on Bloomberg Radio today, Dan Ives, a more understated Ives today. Is this a late August look, Dan? Do we get rid of the fuchsia or lemonade blazer and go with something more stable?
Look, I'm just trying to change it up. Late August, going into Labor Day, and but those callers will be always returning.
Oh, thank you. That's good to know, Dan Ives. Thank you so much. With Wedbush, there, and very importantly, on unit sales of Apple, the most important sentence I heard there. We don't do buy, hold, sell, but the most important mystery I heard there is, what does AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile do? To me, it's my amateur take is, Paul, it's got to be a feeding frenzy.
It's going to be. I mean, if I'm going to upgrade come September, I mean, and I have an iPhone 11, people, so this has been like, I can't remember how many years, but I'll be in that Verizon store looking to upgrade. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Why not? AI, I'm all over it.
Chicago, maybe Emery Horton will get there today after the weekend rains. Kailey Leinz with us in the next hour. Do you think Kailey Leinz knows who Chicago is?
No.
I don't know. Chicago, the DNC in Chicago. Kailey Leinz in the next hour. Bloomberg Surveillance.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Apple's still minting more money than God, right?
Geopolitics front and center for global Wall Street.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
U.S. Secretary of State discussed the conflict in Gaza.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Denise Pellegrini, and for Michael Barr. Getting it done. Lisa Mateo with us as well. Lots going on this hour. Kailey Leinz will join from Chicago. She's awake. She's here, you know. President Biden didn't speak till after midnight last night.
Yeah.
I don't know what that was about,
no,
but, you know. She got like 3 hours sleep. Kailey Leinz will be with us here. Very important conversation coming up. John Stoltzfus says participate in the market, be in the market, be optimistic about the American experiment. We're going to get an important update with futures, the level on SPX, 56.30, closing 56.08 yesterday. I mean, to stay away from the Dow and just look there. How many people a year ago, Paul, we're popping 5,600. It was
please.
Pretty lonely.
Exactly. And for John Farrow, we'll quote the Dow, right on that 41,000 watch.
41,000 mark as well. NASDAQ, a little bit of red on the screen right now. The VIX from a 14 level goes out to 15.04. Let's get right to it. From our Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And traders kind of in this wait-and-see approach after Monday's session lifted the S&P 500 for an 8th session in a row. Right now we have NASDAQ futures, little change, down about 6 points. Dow futures down about 27 points. S&P futures up about a half a point. We have the 2-year yield at 4.02%. That's down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.83%. That's down 3 basis points. Commodities, gold top $2,500 an ounce. We have spot gold higher at $2,525 an ounce. Over to oil, Brent crude $77 a barrel. WTI crude $74 a barrel. To earnings we go. Shares of Lowe's still down nearly 1%. It cut its full year guidance. The tough housing market really keeping consumers on the sideline, so that's affecting those DIY projects. And a big move for Apple, trying to diversify beyond China. Sources saying the company's going to make its first India-made iPhone Pro models this year. Apple shares are little changed. And the European Union says it plans to introduce a 9% tariff on Teslas imported from China. Shares are up, though, 1%, and that's because that tariff actually lower than expected. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. This is a little different. And Jennifer, thank you so much with Bloomberg Automation. This is just, your basic headline that comes in. BNP Paribas, Stefan Slawinski has an underperform on IBM. I love this, International Business Machines Corp. And yet they raised the price target on their underperform rating from 145 to 170.
Still don't like
that's sort of like the bull market catch-up here. IBM right now, I'm getting it up here, right now 194.
Yeah.
So they're raising their price target to $20 below where the price is right now.
Yeah.
That's how goofy this bull market is.
Exactly right. I mean, some of these stocks are just running. I mean, IBM this year's up almost 20%.
I mean, this is ancient. This is OpCo, Oppenheimer company. Is a hold to sell on the street?
Hold to sell,
buy, hold, sell. I've always been there.
If I were running a research department, it would be buy, sell.
Yeah, thank you.
Buy, sell.
Joining us now, a guy who doesn't believe in a hold. John Stoltzfus just says, be in the market, participate. Thrilled he could join us today. John, where's SPX a year out?
I think it's well over 6 a year out, but it'll depend upon what we're looking for, in terms of from the Fed and also what the new administration does, or because it'll be a new administration, regardless of who wins. Right. I mean, in terms of from what we just had.
But what's the earnings story? We just had Kate Moran from BlackRock, and I said, I don't know if I got a rock star answer from her, but John, what do your security analysts say earnings will be that out a year? Do we get the same earnings love that we had the last 90 days?
I would say overall, I don't want to speak for them, but I can speak for our team. We would expect that we're going to see revenue and earnings growth will continue So long as we remain on a path where we have a Federal Reserve that remains sensitive to practicing its mandate, and we continue to see resilience, whether it's in business, the consumer, or to some degree at least in terms of job postings. Although I understand that on, I think it's Wednesday or Thursday, we get that revision number. It'll be interesting to see what that jobs number looks like in terms of in aggregate thus far.
John, you mentioned the Fed a couple of times here. We're going to hear from Fed Chairman Jay Powell later this week in Jackson Hole. What do you expect to hear? Are you expecting any surprises whatsoever?
I'm not. I'm expecting him to remain. His general message has been one that will likely continue in Jackson Hole this week. It'll probably be essentially the Fed has made great progress. They remain data dependent. Are looking for the confidence to begin to lower rates, and I think generally it'll be with it'll be an intimation that likely the market is going to get. I shouldn't say the market, but the Fed is going to provide Main Street and Wall Street with a down payment that'll look probably like a 25 bips cut, but he won't talk about that directly.
John, if I say to people, corporations adapt. And I guess I've been right on that for 2 years, but who knows about the next year. But when I say corporations for adapt, how do you translate that? As they adapt on capital spending, do they adapt on headcount? How do actual companies adapt?
I think they adapt on both of those that you just mentioned, CapEx and headcount. It certainly showed up in terms of technology, in terms of the technology companies last year when they began cutting, and the market liked that when they were beginning to cut warehoused employees. And then in terms of CapEx, I think investors are generally pleased to see that the investment in AI is not just within technology and communication services, but it's across the other 9 sectors as well, as business looks to create greater efficiencies. I think, by the way, I also think the consumer is going to look for greater efficiencies. And that's why, when you get upgrades coming in smartphones, that'll be something that should benefit those manufacturers without being specific on names.
Hey, John, we're pretty much gotten through these earnings cycle here. We have some retailers this week. What's your takeaway? Were the earnings good enough to keep this market moving?
Oh, I think so. I think if anything, when we look at the earnings, we've got 4 sectors, double-digit earnings growth, and as I recall, and I'm not just going to say I recall, it's the best in line was healthcare, 16.5% so far, with about 93% of companies having reported. The Utes, utilities, 15.23% earnings growth. And then you've got consumer discretionary, 13.9%. You'd never believe it based on the performance of consumer discretionary stock.
What is it? I mean, we're talking to a guy dressed conservatively. We just talked to Dan Ives, who was irresponsibly colorful today. What is Apple and Mag 7 going to do, John Stoltzfus?
Well, I've got to say, I can comment on Mag 7 rather than individual company, because since I manage money, the OpCo doesn't like me pitching my book.
Sure.
But I can say this, related to Mag 7, I would expect that they will continue to be where investors will look for now in terms of earnings growth that generally remains ahead of other sectors, though this most recent sector showed it was healthcare, the Utes, and consumer discretionary, where the double-digit action was. So I think it's a broadening of the effect as we go forward. And while I think the Mag 7 will remain in the leadership, it will not necessarily be that which is the lead dog, so to speak, in the pack.
John Stoltzfus,
I like dogs.
Thank you so much. Love to hear you talk about the Utes. Paul, the old days, Utes was like, you just followed D.
Yeah.
D was Dominion.
Dominion.
You just followed
Dominion
D.
Energy, yep.
That was like your proxy. Everything else was noise.
Yep.
There was D when you followed the Utes.
Yeah.
The Utes are up helping because of AI, because they all need energy.
They all need power. Yeah, it's a derivative play. I mean, Alex Steele, she was all over that. Energy as a derivative play for AI.
John Stoltzfus was 6,000-ish looking out a year. Denise Pellegrini fell off her chair when she heard that. I read on the screen right now the VIX 15.09. With our news in New York City, Denise Pellegrini.
All right, thank you, Tom. President Biden delivering an emotional, bittersweet call for Democrats to rally behind his Vice President Kamala Harris last night at the DNC inaugural.
Selecting Kamala was the very first decision I made when I became our nominee. And it was the best decision I made my whole career.
And Biden also pleading with voters to keep fighting what he called the dangerous ideas of Donald Trump. Last night, he was the headliner there. Today, we'll have Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, and second gent Doug Emhoff. That'll be tomorrow. Here's what Biden said last night.
Democracy has prevailed. Democracy has delivered. And now democracy must be preserved.
And Biden also talking about the Middle East to reporters yesterday, saying he remains hopeful about a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in the region today. He says Israel has accepted a ceasefire proposal, and Bloomberg's Amir Abu Omar says the ball is now in Hamas court.
We know that the mediators have conveyed Israel's demands to Hamas. So it's now really up to Hamas, what Hamas decides, and whether they do, in fact, agree to the terms of this latest agreement.
And that's Bloomberg Abir Abu Omar there. Israel has recovered the bodies, meantime, of 6 hostages who had been held in the Gaza Strip. And a year after becoming a Grand Slam champion, Coco Gauff is now teaming up with the Breakfast of Champions as she gets set to defend her U.S. Open title. She's going to be on the cover of a limited edition box of Wheaties. She won the tournament in 2023 at age 19. Global news 24 hours a day and whatever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Denise Pellegrini. Tom, back over to you.
Do people still eat Wheaties? I mean,
Yeah,
they were completely ubiquitous in our youth.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Got them upstairs on the 6th
Good
floor.
morning, General Mills.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have Wheaties upstairs?
Yeah, absolutely. Breakfast of Champions. They're all day, all night.
Oh, yeah.
I did not know that.
People have it for dinner.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, but to be on the box, Tom, that's still big, I think, for
it's
an athlete.
huge.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, that's just one of those things that stood the test of time.
Makes you feel like you're 19 again.
This is from Wikipedia. This is where I'm coming from. Recently, comma, sales of Wheaties in the U.S. have declined significantly. From 2004, when Pellegrini forced them on her children, to 2014, sales of Wheaties declined 78%.
Really?
Wow.
Do you have, Lisa, do you have cereal at breakfast anymore?
I don't, but my kids do. It's my Cheerios, Rice Krispies. That's kind of it. I know, boring.
But that's standard fare. I mean, you know.
Okay.
All right. Hey,
Very
Tom,
good.
I just had an Emery Horton sighting.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, she's got this
still in New
suitcase.
York?
She's heading out. You know.
Well, a lot of people are struggling. There was terrible
she's trying
rains,
to-
folks.
yeah.
Sort of Washington up to Boston, and lots of transportation shut down. And there's a huge number of people that
Yep.
missed last night.
So
in
Emery
Chicago.
just heading up the escalator. Hopefully she'll get to where she gets to Chicago.
Team coverage on that, and Kailey Leinz will join us here in a moment with a balance of power. This is very cool that she'll be with us. I got a bunch of questions for her. I guess tonight's the Obama night.
I think so.
They trot out the president and the first lady. And
Yep.
we'll do it day 2 at the DNC. Kailey Leinz coming up. This is Bloomberg Surveillance from New York City. Good morning.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures, well, just struggling to make much headway after that rally that drove the markets closer to all-time highs. It's a tough battle. We got NASDAQ futures down 0.1%, down 39 points. Dow futures down 35 points. S&P futures down about 3. We have the 2-year yield at 4.01%. That's down 5 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.84%, and that's down 3 basis points. Kroger kicked off that dollar bond sale to fund its Albertsons tie-up. Now, sources saying they're looking to sell in as many as 7 parts, and the size could be around $10 billion. We have Kroger shares up about 0.1%. Albertsons up about 0.3%. And we have a win for Alaska Air Hawaiian Holdings. The Justice Department decided against challenging their $1.9 billion merger. But they're not out of the woods yet. They still need approval from the Department of Transportation. Alaska Air up more than 1%. Hawaiian Holdings up 11%. And I thought this was interesting. The Wall Street Journal says fewer teenagers and 20-somethings want to drive. It's changing how they spend.
Huge deal.
Higher prices for cars, insurance, repairs. It's all pushing them away from cars.
Deal.
Yeah, they're learning to go into public transportation and rides from mom and dad, too, of course.
And
they're
Ubers.
relying on. And Ubers.
And
Yes.
Ubers. This is a huge trend. My kids have absolutely no interest
In getting a license.
getting a car.
No, or license, yeah.
Or even a license. But, granted, it's New York City. I get that, folks, across the nation, it's not the same. But, wow, has there been a shift.
Whereas when we were growing up, I mean, the day you
could.
New Jersey, the day you hit 17,
massive
boom.
trauma. My father was
exactly.
petrified. He says, you're not driving until you're 16 and a half. I thought I would die.
Yeah.
I mean, that ruined my childhood.
And folks in rural part of the country, they drive really
14.
young. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Did you drive a clutch? Come on.
Yes, I drove clutch up until a year ago, and when they'd stopped making them for BMW.
They're doing the VW.
I went to Germany to beg for a BMW.
Did you?
Yes.
VW Beetle. They're doing it in Mad Men. One of the seasons. I'm in tears because it's my childhood. Lisa, do you drive a clutch?
That was my first car.
Oh my God, she's such a trooper.
Yep.
She's like huge. No. Kailey Leinz, good morning from Chicago. Do you know how to drive a car with a clutch?
I have no idea.
There we go. We welcome Kailey Leinz at the DNC with Balance of Power. Kailey, I want to go to tonight, and President Obama is speaking, and I think there's so many people that don't understand what Joe Biden wrought. In 2008, first-term Obama got 69 million votes. Joe Biden got 17% more votes, 81 million. How does Vice President Harris do a Biden and get that kind of turnout, that kind of 81 million popular votes?
Well, that kind of turnout, Tom, frankly, is something that money can help you buy, or at least you can invest in the resources to drive the turnout to vote effort in the swing states that ultimately will decide this election. And certainly the Harris campaign does have ample money to spend. They raised $310 million just in the month of July. The campaign said yesterday 60% of that was from women in particular. So turnout in the women demographic is going to be important. That's something that was alluded to on the convention floor last night as they specifically focused on the issue of reproductive rights, heard stories of people's pregnancies and miscarriage, their inability to access abortive care. And that is something, a big theme that this convention is focusing on as they try to drive turnout, not just among female voters, but also among certain demographics like Latino and Black.
Well, that's where I wanted to go. What's the Latino focus in Chicago? Axios features that today. And to me, the turnout dynamic that Pew Research identifies is about Latino. Give us a vignette of Latino visibility.
Well, the Pew Research survey you're alluding to, Tom, that came out last week shows that Harris does have a solid lead with Latino voters over Donald Trump. It's something to the tune of about 17 points. And when Biden was still in the race, he was effectively tied with Trump in that demographic. We actually spoke here on set in Chicago yesterday with Frankie Miranda, who runs the Hispanic Federation. They have done specific polling on this, and he told us 57% of Latinos that they surveyed say they are now more enthusiastic and interested in this election cycle cycle since Kamala Harris entered the race. He said 73% of registered Latino voters are now almost certain that they are going to vote in this election cycle. And that could be critical in certain states, including swing states like Nevada, where the New York Times and Siena polling that came out over the weekend found Harris within 1 point of Donald Trump. So the Latino vote could make a big difference in a state like that.
I don't know where it clicks in, Paul, but we get to a point where turnout is the only thing discussed. Policy doesn't matter. This, that doesn't matter. All it's going to be is get out the vote.
Get out the vote. Kailey, the Democratic Party came into Chicago with some pretty solid momentum with VP Harris being named the top of the ticket here. They had a good first night. It seemed like last night. What's the level of optimism in Chicago these days among party faithful?
Well, there's a lot of energy, Tom. Democrats, especially at the highest levels, are very enthusiastic about the Harris-Walz ticket. And frankly, it seems to me quite relieved that this is a convention celebrating that and not a convention filled with dread about whether or not Joe Biden, as an octogenarian, would be able to ultimately win the election in November. Of course, it was an emotional night in Chicago last night when Joe Biden gave his address very late into the evening. He talked well past midnight on the East Coast about his legacy, but he tied that very much to the effort of not just him as president, but also Kamala Harris as vice president. I will say, though, while the Democratic Party is trying to preach this notion of unity, that they have all coalesced behind this ticket, divisions are still certainly present. You see a lot of that outside the United Center, as there's been thousands of protesters protesting over the ongoing war in Gaza. And that's why developments in regard to a potential ceasefire, which Israel has agreed to, Hamas, the jury is still out on. But the political timing of that, if it comes to fruition, certainly can't go without notice. The effort toward a ceasefire was raised by Biden last night. It was raised by progressives like Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who also spoke on the floor. And I would guess that it's going to come up repeatedly, potentially in Harris's own remarks on Thursday night.
So going to there, Kailey, VP Harris's remarks on Thursday, a lot of the country, most of the country is still trying to get to know Kamala Harris. What do we expect to hear from her on Thursday? What do you think the tone and the meat of the speech will be?
It'll likely be a lot of the frames we've come to expect from her over the course of her now 4 weeks old candidacy. This notion that she is looking toward the future, that she does not want to go back to the past, that she is fighting for freedom, which is one of the themes of the Democratic convention here in Chicago, whether that be from reproductive rights to the right to vote. And likely a lot of that will push forward on Thursday. I've been warned by many a Democratic strategist not to expect many fine points of policy to emerge in the speech, not going to get very much into details, whether it comes to economic policy or otherwise. I would note, though, before we hear Harris on Thursday, she and her running mate, Tim Walz, won't even be here in Chicago for the speeches from the Obamas or from the second gentleman tonight. They're heading to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to the Pfizer Forum, where the Republican convention was held just 4 weeks ago. So they're taking their campaign to the swing states, even as all the other Democrats are gathered here in Chicago.
Kailey, thanks for the brief. See you tomorrow if you can do it again. Kailey Leinz, thank you so much. Balance of power. Look for that on Bloomberg here near the 12 noon hour and also 5 p.m. tonight, 12 to 2. And 5 p.m. as well. While Kailey was talking, and this goes back to Jeff Yu this morning, going the other way, euro strength, dollar weakness. Paul, euro through 111 is a wow statistic for global Wall Street.
Yeah, it really is, Tom. I mean, just kind of you look at this here, and the euro has just been really strong here. And again, I think the expectation is this Fed's cutting rates, Tom, and when they start, they're going to continue for a while here. So we're seeing some strength here, and the euro, you're right, as Mr. Yu pointed out this morning, showing some strength here this morning.
You know, under parity in the autumn of 2022, call it 2 years ago. And we're now popping. We're up 16% on euro. Euro's terrible. It's falling apart. Everything's wrong. They can't do the Olympics. Let's see, what else? You know, gloom. Nobody wants to travel there.
Yep.
You can't get a ticket. You can't get a seat to Greece right now.
No, I mean, it's nice with a little hindsight how good those Olympics were in Paris. They certainly did a great job. And now we go to LA. But no, you take note of that strength in the euro here. The pound sterling, 1.30 on pound sterling, a little bit higher here as well.
On Brent, so we haven't mentioned it today. I've been remiss on that. 77.86 on Brent. West Texas gives it back to 74.60. Paul and I in awe of gold. 23.60. It's up $23.
Yep. Again?
25.65. I'm not on a 2600 watch yet.
We'll get Dennis
but maybe
Gartman
I'm wrong
on. Maybe
that.
he'll tell us kind of what the next level is.
We're going to get Dennis Gartman on at some point. James Steele with HSBC.
Yep, also
although
good.
He's with HSBC. James Steele may take the month off.
Well, they've got a big. What I learned about HSBC, they've got a huge vault.
They do.
Of gold. I didn't know
That's
that.
what they do.
Yeah,
Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney with your opening bell report. How are the markets going to react after quite a rally? The S&P 500 lifted for the 8th day in a row. That's the longest winning streak in 2024. Investors have really been feeling more confident the Federal Reserve will soon show that it's ready to start cutting interest rates. We shall see. Central bankers head to Jackson Hole this week. Let's get to the numbers that we're off and running right now with the S&P 500. Little change, down about 5 points, 5,603. The Dow, little change as well, down 27 points, 40,868. And the NASDAQ down about 0.1%, 27 points, 17,848. We have the 2-year yield at 4.01%, down 5 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.84%, and that's down 3 basis points. We have spot gold higher, $2,529 an ounce. Brent crude, $78 a barrel. WTI crude, $74 a barrel. At the open, I want to also check in with the lows. They're up about 0.5% after it lowered its full year guidance. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. This is going to be a really, really interesting conversation. Eric Lynch joins with Scharf Investments, and it's about, okay, what are we doing with our money? Because that's the wheelhouse at Scharf. Eric, it's a bull market, and in every bull market, we try to take advantage of the bull market for people scared stiff. And once again, raising its heads in new packaged investments is I want to participate in the Standard & Poor's 500, but I'm going to write options to build income against it, where I give up some of the future capital gain, but I get a little bit of income along the way to goose the S&P 500. You and I have seen this before. Is it going to work this time?
Yeah, it's definitely a decent strategy. I think the issue with the S&P 500 right now, Tom, is that, it's become very dominated by, more so than ever, the handful of actually individual names that are outperforming the S&P 500 are at an all-time low. And so I think, what's most interesting to me about Q2 and the earnings season that we're almost concluding here is that we had tremendous earnings growth. It was broad. It was outside just the Max 7. It was aggregate up 11% year over year. We haven't had that much growth for over 3 years, or about 3 years rather. So, I think obviously, writing options is a decent income producing strategy. But I think what's kind of obfuscated, the volatility of August has obfuscated the fact that we had a great earnings season and it's broadening out.
Right. So would you suggest there a more diversified approach, or can you have the confidence to go less diversified?
Yeah, I think this looks a lot like the kind of market opportunity that we saw, Tom, following the kind of 90s large cap growth market leadership period, where value and small caps and international stocks and all sorts of things lagged tremendously large cap growth kind of tech stocks, only to kind of outperform and produce equity-like returns that were really good from 2000 to 2007, 2008 before the financial crisis hit. Meanwhile, the S&P was actually flat for that period, and growth stocks were down. And so why I'm bringing this up is because July was really a case in point where we saw some of that. Small caps were up 10%, median Max 7 was down 5%, value stocks were up 5%, your way S&P was up 5%. And it makes sense because the Max 7, until the last couple of quarters, was responsible for over 100% of earnings growth year over year. This Q2, you had things like financial sector up 18% year over year, healthcare up 17%, right behind IT at 19%. So you're seeing a nice, healthy broadening. You're not paying a lot outside of tech for multiples. And so I think that's actually where the opportunity is, getting really good earnings growth off of multiples that are 15, 16, 17 times, very reasonable vis-a-vis an S&P 500 trading at 21 and a Max 7 trading at 30.
So, Eric, I think a lot of folks are saying, yeah, we see that broadening out, but is it a head fake? I mean, is this real? I mean, we're finally seeing some broadening in this market away from the Max 7?
Yeah, I think we're really, Paul, I don't think it is a head fake this time, because you're finally seeing broadening. And we got out our Bloomberg terminals a couple of days ago, and we looked at kind of this similar period, right? We looked at January 2000, guys, and we looked at the top 10 market cap stocks back then, the tech ones. You had software, Oracle and Microsoft. You had chips and Qualcomm and Intel, blah, 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 blah. You had a growth scarcity then, just like you did now. 3 years of annualized revenue coming into 2000 was 20% versus basically flat for the S&P. Everybody says those tech companies didn't make money. They did. Earnings was annualizing at 43% versus just 8% for the S&P. Guess what? That lines up very similar to the last 3 years of growth of the top 10 market cap names, the S&P, where you had this growth scarcity. But now, this most recent quarter, you don't have it. So consensus estimates for 2025, just looking out further, Max 7 earnings are median is about 16%. So still really great. But shockingly, Russell 1000 value earnings growth estimates are 15 right behind it, and the equal weighted S&P is also 15. So you're seeing in Q2, you've got only 28 companies in the Q2 reports reference the term recession. The 10-year average is 60. So if we're going to have a soft landing and reflation across the economy, like you're still seeing right now, then I don't think it is a head fake, Paul.
All right. So given that background here, Eric, I mean, where do we really go here? I mean, do I really want to go out there and look for value? Do I want to look at small cap? Do I want to look at mid cap? I mean, is there some special areas of the market that haven't been picked over?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say almost everything else outside of Max 7 and large cap growth, tech stocks. That's a great thing. Trailing 10 years through this June, large cap growth has outperformed value 3-1, small caps 4-1, and international stocks 6-1. And so the valuations are much more attractive outside. These large cap growth stocks, the big platform internet businesses, are great, and you should have exposure to them. But given their dominance in the S&P, the world indexes, all sorts of instruments, investors should really start diversifying away from it and putting some money to work in these cheaper areas.
Eric Lynch, thank you. Eric Lynch with Scharf Investments with us this morning there on the theme. The 6-1 gets it. One of the great missed calls, and full disclosure, folks, I enjoyed losing money here or underperforming. The international call. We talked to Damian Sassower here. He will tell you it's just flat out international stocks do better when the dollar's weaker.
Yep.
And the salient point of this 2 days this week is the dollar weakness that we continue to see. Witness euro dollar 110.98 blowing through 111 moments ago. And you see it, I mean, we mentioned with Derek Wallbank. What did he say? Yen, Sing dollar?
Yen, Sing dollar, yes.
Okay, if I look at something like the Philippine peso.
Oh, boy.
Which I'm forced to look at from time to time.
Yes,
I mean, peso, massive weakness. Didn't get to 60 peso per dollar. But this morning you're enjoying it at 56.5 pesos for dollar.
Yeah.
And so, you're seeing some
movement.
I don't know what the why is, but, so maybe it's the yen carry unwind, but the answer is dollar weakness. And all of a sudden the international stocks, is that the great unknown?
I guess maybe. And, if you go, developed markets, emerging markets, certainly when you look at Europe, you always get a valuation play there because they don't have that tech component to the market that we have. That's more manufacturing and industrials over there in Europe, but you got to be careful about that value trap there.
What happens at 2 p.m. this afternoon?
2 p.m.
That's like we noodle around. We do an August noodle.
Yep.
And then buy orders come in at 2 p.m.
That'd be nice.
Well, that's what happened yesterday. It was a moonshot.
Carol Masser, she's in charge of the afternoon.
It's just remarkable how that works. Yeah. The dollar again, 102 on DXY is very important. Gold not at the 23 up $23, but up $20, and now 25.60 on gold as well. In the fixed income space, I'm looking at the real yield. It's coming very importantly. Real yield was a 1.79, 1.80, and is really a lower real yield at 1.76, and that may speak to the economic data, the anticipation here as we go to Jackson Hole. Philadelphia Fed index at 8:30 came in moldy. That's a
minus
economic
25,
phrase.
Yeah.
Minus 25 is pretty grim. Tomorrow, another dearth of data, to be honest about it. There'll be payroll revisions. Anna Wong will be riveted to that. And then you get to a huge amount of data into the Powell speech on Thursday.
You get initial jobs claims, Tom. You get some PMIs
housing sales.
Housing sales, so there'll be some economic data.
New home sales really right around when Chairman Powell speaks on Friday. We'll have coverage of that. Durable goods, I don't know what to do with that. And so right now, red and green on the screen it's just churn to the tape. It feels like August. But that could change over the last 8 days. It has changed. Where were you 8 days ago?
Oh, please. That was crazy in the morning.
They want me to leverage triple leveraged all cash and do forple leveraged. And I'm not sure. I mean,
let me call out the 30-year mortgage for Lisa Mateo because she is in the market for a new abode.
What number?
6.54% on your 30-year fixed. Oh, so it's coming down. It's coming down slowly.
Red and green on the screen. The Dow negative 63. S&P and Nasdaq up fractional. With our news in New York City, Denise Pellegrini.
All right, thank you, Tom. Opening night of the Democratic Party National Convention in Chicago last night. President Biden delivering really an emotional call for Democrats to rally behind Vice President Kamala Harris.
Selecting Kamala was the very first decision I made when I became our nominee. And it was the best decision I made my whole career. And she'll be a president our children can look up to.
And the president speaking there with tears in his eyes. Harris making a surprise appearance at the podium.
Let us always remember, when we fight, we win. God bless you. God bless the United States of America.
And Harris will speak again at the finale later this week. Today, the headliners are Barack and Michelle Obama and also Harris' husband. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accepted a ceasefire proposal to halt the war in Gaza. And he says the next step is for Hamas to say yes. Nomi Bar Yaakov, an associate fellow at the British think tank Chatham House, says it looks like Blinken is tired of all the stalling.
I think the US has lost patience with its allies' behavior. And I think they're going to hopefully inflict a cost, not just leverage, but a cost that Israel won't be able to fathom if they do not.
And Blinken is also speaking with Egyptian and Qatar negotiators there, as we hear from Nomi Bar Yaakov of Chatham House. And Morgan Stanley International Chairman Jonathan Bloomer is among those missing. Bloomer missing along with UK tech entrepreneur Mike Lynch and others as Italian authorities continue to search the wreckage of a luxury yacht that sank during a storm off the coast of Sicily. Global News 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Denise Pellegrini. This is Bloomberg Tom.
J.S. Marcus for the highly addictive mansion section of the Wall Street Journal. On Golden Pond was out 1 million years ago about a lovely lake in New Hampshire. And they're in a little cottage up there, and it's like, it's like LL Bean, and there's black flies everywhere. The Evans family, going back over 100 years, is selling their 1899 mansion cottage. It's asking $9.5 million. I urge you, I'll put it out on Twitter. I haven't put it out yet, but it's sort of. Paul, I would recommend that this will be a buying frenzy.
It's
People
a phenomenal looking
will call up and they'll just say, don't sell it till you talk to me. And I would suggest this movie set piece of New England architecture will be a bidding frenzy among some of the richest people in America.
Tom, I think you're right. This is a lakefront house built by a Titanic survivor.
Yeah.
Lists for the first time in a century. The New Hampshire home on Squam Lake has been in the same family since the 1920s.
And there's some illusion that the couple that survived the Titanic was the rewrite for the characters in the movie Titanic.
Oh, okay.
They made it different, but it's a really cool story. I'll get it out on Twitter and LinkedIn. The Evans house on Squam Lake for sale. Red and green on the screen right now. The VIX 14.91. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, after a rally that drove the market closer to its all-time high, stocks right now, well, we're mixed. We have the NASDAQ little change, up about 12 points. The Dow down 0.1%, 48 points. The S&P 500 little changed, up about 4. We have the 2-year yield at 4.02%, down 4 basis points. The 10-year yield at 3.84%, and that's down 3 basis points. The currencies of the dollar weaker. Japanese yen stronger, up about 0.3% at 146.12 against the dollar. We have the euro, British pound stronger. Bitcoin up more than 2.5% at 60,000. Shares of Eli Lilly, they're up about 4.5%. A 3-year study had found patients that are taking its weight loss shot, Zepbound, well, they were 94% less likely to develop diabetes. And then you have Boeing shares down 2%. It paused test flights of its 777X jetliner. It has to inspect damaged engine mounts, so another strike for Boeing there. And since we talked earlier about Paramount and Edgar Bronfman Jr.'s $4.3 billion bid to take control of the company, let's check in with those shares. Right now, they're down about 2%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thank you so much. Across this nation, this is the most important conversation Bloomberg Surveillance will have today. He has served the nation in the military, and as we lose track and touch of any number of topics, I'll get to one that has to do with domestic politics, but Paul is looking at how he and I have stepped back and lost touch with Ukraine with Mick Mulroy.
Mick Mulroy, Tom, he's co-founder of the Lobo Institute, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East at the U.S. Department of Defense, former paramilitary operations officer at CIA, and former U.S. Marine Infantry officer, and we thank Mr. Mulroy for his service there. Mick, there's a million ways to go, as Tom was suggesting. Let's start with Ukraine. It seems very noteworthy that Ukraine has launched this incursion into Russia. Tell us what that means for the bigger picture there.
Well, Paul, as Sun Tzu said, attack where the enemy is not, right? So they basically did a really significant intelligence, I think, analysis of where Russia was weak, and they hit the seams and gaps. I do actually think this is more like a Doolittle raid, if you remember that. Basically, just to kind of like give a psychological punch, in that case to Japan, this place to Russia, but they didn't really expect it to go as successful as it was. And then they just capitalized on it. They sent in more troops. They brought in, combined air and ground operations, and they've taken over, 1,000 square kilometers now, over 80 villages. It's really significant, and it looks like they've decided that they will set up a military headquarters and potentially use it as some kind of bargaining for when the actual discussions start for the end of the war.
And when do you think that may be? Because it seems, Mick, that we've been grinding here, this almost war of attrition within Ukraine. Now we have this development within Russia. Does that bring the Russians to the table? Do you think that accelerates any potential discussions?
I think it could, right? So obviously Russia's taken far more Ukrainian territory, but in the last year, now the Ukrainians have taken more Russian territory than Russians have taken of Ukraine. So it really is shifting the balance here, and it's really telling Russia that they're not impervious to this war coming home. It's now home, and Russians are being relocated because of it. So I think, frankly, when it comes to a war of attrition, Ukraine can't win that. They are vastly outnumbered. But what they can do is take bold moves like this and change the calculation of Vladimir Putin.
Mick, I'm bringing this up with great respect for your public service. A kid was in Brighton, Mass., which was blue-collar Boston, and he became an enlistee, I believe, in the Marines. Got out of the Marines. They threw him into officer candidate school, and he ended up being the general of the Marines, John F. Kelly. You served with Mattis. General Kelly, in the last 24 hours, has said what former President Trump said about our Medal of Honor winners. It was basically, I'm editorializing here, folks, excuse me, reprehensible. Can you please discuss how we conflate something like the Medal of Honor with the Medal of Freedom?
Well, that's first up, Tom, have nothing but the utmost respect, as every American should, for General Kelly. He was an enlisted Marine in Vietnam, went all the way onto a 4-star general, his service was impeccable. He had 2 sons that served, one that lost his life in Afghanistan. So that's John Kelly. As far as the Medal of Honor, I think it's really important that, we have different definitions of heroes in society. To me, although I super respect athletes, Olympic athletes, that's not really heroic. Heroic is when you put your life on the line for somebody else. And in that realm, we have all sorts of valor awards, but the top of the top is the Medal of Honor. And those are the individuals I think that we should hold on the highest podium, if you will, in the United States. And although the President's Medal of Freedom is a very important award, and some important people have gotten it, it is in no way close, in my opinion, to the Medal of Honor. And the fact that you have to have given the last measure of devotion in many cases to get the Medal of Honor is something to be applauded and not something to be degraded.
Hey, Mick, while we have you, we need to just get your thoughts on the latest coming out of the Middle East. Hamas is out with some, I guess, the latest reporting from Bloomberg. Hamas is, quote, keen to reach ceasefire deal with Israel and Gaza. Are we anywhere closer to getting some type of ceasefire here, do you think?
Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, this is something that needs to happen both for the humanitarian situation in Gaza, the hostages, 8 of which are Americans, to come home, and then to move this into a discussion about the future. The holdup apparently is that they're all talking about the second phase of this proposal, which is where they're disagreeing. I think from the U.S. perspective, they just want to get to the first phase. When it comes to Hamas, there's some rumors that Sinwar is sick, has some kind of health issues that needs to be treated outside. That might push them more toward, quite frankly, a ceasefire agreement, because in my perspective, Hamas basically just cares about Hamas, not the people of Gaza. But this is something that I think is in the last stages. The U.S. has been very optimistic many times before, so quite frankly, a lot of the people that follow this don't really pay attention to that. It's really what Hamas is saying and what Israel is saying specifically. And although Israel looks like they've accepted this bridging proposal that was presented by Secretary Blinken, now it's up to Hamas to see if they will. It's been one of those things that they've never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity, and hopefully that won't happen here.
Mick Mulroy, thank you so much for joining us this morning, particularly those comments on what General Kelly had said about the Medal of Honor. Mick Mulroy, serving the nation, of course, and with Lobo Institute. Paul, I don't know where that will be through the election cycle, but it's created a massive uproar within the military.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's just no other way to put it. We don't want to editorialize on that, but there it is. Needless to say, I mean, it was very public as well. Can we also state it's public that the NASDAQ doesn't want to go down?
No.
I mean, it's 954. Where are we going to be?
Yeah.
But, wow.
Yeah, so a little red and green on the screen there. Tom, as you like to say, the S&P's up about 7 points. The Dow's off 50 points. The NASDAQ's up 32 points, and the Russell off just slightly here.
What do you think? I mean, we're just modeling out continued earnings.
I think so. I mean, I think
with
we had
the Fed
a pretty,
overlay.
And you know what? Gina Martin-Adams from Bloomberg Intelligence has been really consistent with us and in her written research about the earnings resilience of the U.S. economy and the S&P 500. And she was the first person I can remember saying that we're going to get double-digit earnings in the second quarter, and it turns out she was right. Guidance, conservative, more conservative than what we saw in the second quarter, but that's probably to be expected. You're seeing an economy, while it's still growing at a couple of percent, is slowing down. Inflation is still there, although it has come down. So I would expect corporations in the C-suite to be conservative in their outlook.
No, we're going to have to see. We've had Chicago. We got Joe Matthew, Kailey Leinz tonight. Emery Horton on her way out there. We'll have good coverage for you. We've had good coverage on the music front. Thank you for the comments on John Prine. Played that earlier, and of course, Chicago. You got to play Chicago. I mean, Chicago is Chicago. But there's also a whole heritage, incredible heritage of blues out there with Muddy Waters. And there's one guy that's absolutely unique. His name is Buddy Guy. The one guy is Buddy Guy. Buddy Guy, the classic Mustang Sally.
Guess you better slow your Mustang down. Mustang Sally, baby. I guess you better slow your Mustang down.